We are slightly late, but that's okay, right?
Do you even have the sheet for us?
Okay. Just this.
The interaction or the scaling one?
No, the
Okay.
the storyboard.
Oh, this one.
And
Don't have this.
Kirsty. Okay. The wall with the.
Quack, do you have a sheet for us for talking points?
I don't have any slides, but I have
Okay.
notes. I have notes. So
Maybe
let me first, yeah, because maybe I will just first talk, just display the new talent tree, and
you're
I will just maybe introduce a bit what I would like we discuss today. So it's a bit messy, you know. Okay.
currently not displaying anything.
Now am I? No, I am.
Yes.
Right. Okay. It's even like a broken headset, but that's okay. We got something. We got something. So let me start the recording. Oh, I don't need to record because I can directly upload on YouTube. So thank you guys for being here today. We have a new contender today. Hursty is here. So maybe like I think it's the first time you're here, right, Hursty, on the podcast.
No, Jussi has been here.
Yeah.
Jussi has been here.
I think I have been here for like one episode, like half a year ago.
Yeah, I'm 4 or something.
Yeah, probably for any season, like season 3 or season 2 or
There
something.
was this one podcast where the PvPs were also there, and that
Yeah.
was when Jussi was
True.
there.
Yeah,
So-
Eden was there too.
I think it would be nice
Eden
if you
and
can
Cutie. Shout out to
reintroduce-
Cutie.
But it's been a while. Maybe you can reintroduce quickly yourself.
Yeah, I'm Hursty. I'm playing at Shrink the Phoenix on Circle Scenarios. I'm Windwalker main for like 10 years or 8 years or something like that, and I'm pretty active in Peak.
Let's say that.
That's a good that's very
Mildly.
short, I think.
Well, yeah.
Just a
Short
second.
and
Okay.
strong.
I need to sort something at the same time. Oh god. Oh my god. Oh my god.
This is
Um,
perfect.
In the meantime,
I'm doing a lot of things at the same time. Sorry for this. So, yeah.
You can open this one as well. This is what I had in mind for single target, with probably some changes to be made as well.
That's gonna be the worst podcast ever,
Later.
and probably the most important. But who cares? Wait.
Bad timing,
wait.
I guess.
Okay. This. Let me send this file, and we are okay to go. So. Nice. So the idea of this podcast today is to, I would say, present to people the new era word, a rework, Blizzard proposed like for the next expansion. So there are a lot of things to cover on this podcast, and I would like we are not going into like a lot of path, but try to stay a bit clear and factual about the things we have, and not too much theory crafting without any, because I guess right now you're starting preparing things for the War Within, some sheets, some things like this. Like Hursty, you shared with us some scaling graphs, right?
Yeah, you could say something like that. That there's a minor work going on.
Yeah.
So maybe before
Especially
you
since momentum changes a lot about the Fist of Fury scaling, which is pretty funny, to be honest, because at most target caps it's actually better than being uncapped in the first place.
Yeah.
And especially for the ability that is like a main ability in a lot of contents, and gaining a lot of haste scaling now, which is assumed to be very strong in the end, especially with external haste buffs like PI and ID, and okay, ID is arrow haste buff, but Lust on top, or other mechanics like the last boss in Fall. It may be a lot stronger now, and will probably be our main damage, especially in keys.
Okay. So the again, wait, why I have so many notifications? Oh my god, this is not my
Yeah, you're
computer. So
lagging a little bit.
I'm like, yeah, that's normal. Like I'm in the middle of notification.
Yeah, I
Oh,
guess.
okay, I need to sound message. Okay, let's deactivate those notification sound. And okay, need to leave this. Okay, so yeah, we have a lot of things to cover. So basically, maybe for people that are just popped into the stream and even in World of Warcraft, the new talent system for the War Within would revolve around I would say two things. The first thing is the classic Dragonflight system. So we have the talent tree, the class tree, sorry, on the left, which is common to all the classes,
Hmm.
and the class tree on the right, which is well, class specific. And we have this new thing at the middle, which is the hero tree, which is an extra layer added for the War Within. The thing is, the rework was concerning first was about class and talent tree, and the hero I would say specification was there before this rework. So today we're just maybe talking mainly, I hope, about the new class tree, the new spec tree, sorry, rather than the hero tree. Even I know there are some links between both, but maybe first we can talk about this spec tree. I think we have a lot of things to say
Yeah.
about this. So to be a bit like to make maybe the discussion a bit easier, I like going from the say the global, okay, the philosophy, the globality of the spec tree, and then we can go into details about specific talents, nodes, things like this. So just maybe to explain my reasoning, like if you remember on Dragonflight, we had three paths. I mean, three builds: red, green, blue.
Hmm.
So my first question about this, would say, pathing is pretty simple. Do we have the same, I would say, philosophy of three path or something like more AoE one side, single target the other side? So maybe like the bottom right is single target, the bottom left is AoE. I don't even know. Is that the case, or do you think first is going to be a bit more complex than that?
Definitely more complex than that. There are strong single target talents kind of sprinkled throughout. There's good AoE value sprinkled throughout. And I don't think either side is particularly heavy in either direction.
Hmm.
I think the biggest difference between going a single target path and the AoE path is actually not in the lower part, the tier 3 part, like it was in Dragonflight entirely. It's more about the picks you do in tier 1 and tier 2. Like,
Yeah.
especially when you look at the top talents in tier 1, you have like, I think, 11 points to spend, and you only need 8 in this part. So for AoE builds, you need to go down all 3 paths. But in single target, you can just ignore the left path, because the left path is mostly about Mark of the Crane and shadowboxing threats, which makes your Black Tick hit 3 targets. But those aren't needed in single target. So you can instead just ignore Touch of the Tiger and Hardened Souls, just pick up momentum boost for gaining more Fist of Fury damage, and then path down the entire right side with more points, which makes a bit of a difference, at least, like a few percent maybe in that. And this will actually make the difference between a pure single target build and a cleaver AoE build, because cleaver AoE needs the left side entirely as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So okay, so yeah, it's like we can clearly see there is a mix like of AoE talents, Dance of Kiji on the left. I know we're not going too much into details right now. It's just like when you look quickly at the tree, you can see, okay, well, Dance of Kiji, we know it. Tender Fist, we know it, and this is something interesting for both single target and AoE cleave with the stacks. This is something we already know from Dragonflight, so this is not like brand new, even though Thunder Fist stacks are new. But this is something we can look at a bit later. Okay, good to hear. Second question about this globality is so in Babylonius, this is something I think I wrote on Discord for you guys. In Babylonius article, and you guys in Discord have always pointed out some flaws of Windwalker. Probably one of the biggest one, like that is pretty common. Read is the haste value, which is not as high as other classes. Obviously, I'm starting with haste because I think this talent tree will revolve about haste. Do you? My question is very simple. Right now, if you look at this class spec tree, all those flaws, all those drawbacks of monks fixed, or there are still some things very important to fix, or like the major things have been fixed with this talent tree. What are your opinion about this?
I think I'll go first. Basically, there is a ton that was wrong that got addressed. But also, by fixing them, there are some new problems that I think should be addressed to get improved on. So, for example, as you mentioned, haste value has been very low in the past, and this is something that I think they actually may have almost overdone now. But personally, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, it could be a good thing.
Problems there are definitely some problems, but I think it's probably a bit too early to go into that.
Yeah, maybe just like your big, like it's very big picture opinion. Like, okay,
big picture opinion, we might have too many modifiers, and the talent tree could definitely use some better connections between some talents, because right now, especially for AoE, there's some concern with how you actually get this done properly. And
Yeah, I think I can maybe expand on that a little bit. It seems like there's a lot of potential builds in AoE that are like almost complete, but you'd rather have one complete build than several potential incomplete builds because you're just lacking one or two talent points to really make them work.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if that's an actual problem, because like for example, if you look at Retribution Paladin, they have the issue to have a complete AoE build, because in the complete AoE build they are not capable of doing proper single target damage.
Wait, hang on.
Not
That's
having
how
this,
I meant it. I
okay.
didn't mean a complete AoE build as in fully focused on AoE. I mean, I meant a complete AoE build as in complete to make all the different parts work. As in, you know, if you don't have that, then you don't have a functional build.
Oh yeah, okay. Never mind.
Yeah, so that's why I want you to clarify about what you mean by complete.
Yeah. That's what I meant. Is that there's a lot of potential for different AoE builds, I think, but it's hard to make them, you know, hard to finish them with the talent points that we have and the amount of talent points that you need to invest into earlier tiers. A lot of things that you're taking, or well, a few things that you're taking just to get to the next tier, which I don't think ever feels good, but that's just sort of a fundamental flaw of the talent tree system, I guess. And a lot of talents in the later tiers that seem like really juicy to get, and it would be a real shame to have to give up one to get the other, especially when they work together so well. There's a lot of great synergy here that I would love to make use of.
But I think that was actually the purpose of talent tree, as you said, is like to make you hesitating, right? On and you have to make choices
Yeah,
for
of
this
course.
laced the top, like the bottom the
But
bottom
even
node.
when that's even in that case, I do think that there should still be a finished build
Yeah.
possible. It should still be. You shouldn't have to give up on synergies just
Mhm.
because of numerical value, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Maybe like it's like they put too much maybe things on the late tier, like on the bottom. Because for example, maybe when you talk about synergy, like the to me the easiest one to look at is the synergy between Zuen Battle Gear and the Skyreach, you know. Uh it's like maybe they could have done, because I feel sometimes in some talent trees the bottom nodes, the bottom capstones, you
Mhm.
don't have to take all of those to have the synergy. It's just like you have a path, it buffs things, and at the end you have, like the latest node is just a buff from the previous
Yeah,
node.
sort of.
Here we can
Also,
see
I
like
kind of do want to preface because I kind of realize where what direction this talk is going to go. So I want to be clear about this. That in the last couple of days, all of the theory crafters and like the Windwalker vets have been talking a lot about these changes. So in our mind, it's already past the initial hype and into the all right, let's figure this shit out.
yes,
So we might sound more critical than you would expect. I
Yeah.
should be clear that we are very excited about this tree. It's great that we are getting it. There's a lot of really cool stuff here, and it's awesome.
yes,
And the improvements are absolutely absurd.
And
Like,
Yeah.
like really great. Someone has actually sat down and had a proper round of game development to make this happen. So
and
great job, Blizzard, on this.
and they
Just
actually
so we're
looked
clear,
at what we wrote we wrote
yeah,
down. Like,
actually got
if you take a
feedback
look
from
at
a long time
Peak of
ago.
if you take a look at Peak of Serenity, there's this little forum thread, I guess, at the bottom that's called Improving Windwalker, and it has an unbelievable amount of content, probably too much at this point. And someone actually took the time to read through most of that and
Yeah.
fixed like the 10 to 15 biggest problems that you saw in there,
Yeah.
which I am extremely happy about.
So
Yeah. And
we are really overall very positive about this.
Mhm.
We might sound less positive in the coming, in the coming talk, but that's just because we're already looking at potential issues. Don't
Yeah.
take that as a sign that we're not very happy
Maybe
with
to
what we
give
got.
you an example of what was in the Improving Woodwalker, I think it was about the Touch of Death. Uh, Too much revolving points and damage around this, and it has been clearly addressed um, on this tree, and that leads me to the next question for you guys. Maybe I would just show on stream the Blizzard philosophy behind the because they put a blue note about this.
Yeah.
So yeah, my question was, do you agree with this overall philosophy of the of the spec tree the Blizzard proposed, and do you feel they understood the issues and the philosophy, like how monk should be played? Even like it's pretty hard because like when you do rework, you don't want maybe to completely kill what makes the spec, its identity. uh Maybe it's like more philosophical question, but do you feel they understood how the spec works, how it should work, and do you agree with the philosophy of Blizzard on the blue post? I will just show to people on stream right now.
I think yeah, they did it very well. Like for example, the my main issue was that when a rework comes, I was never sure if I will like a rework because I like the general play style of Windwalker, and this hasn't really changed a lot through the years. Like if you started playing in Legion, the general idea of Windwalker is still the same. It's still chi management. It's still about bringing your chi consumer on CD in time with proper interactions between them, and that hasn't really changed. Like for example, they changed how our scaling works in a good way. one of the reasons I personally played Windwalker a lot was that Windwalker doesn't really feel bad in the early days of an expansion like other specs do. Like for example, Beastmaster in BFA played like shit in the first few months, and in the end, with the corruption, it was like entirely on crack. Meanwhile, Windwalker played almost equally the entire expansion, and the changes to our scaling, which are mentioned in the post, for example, like making Fist of Fury scale a lot better with haste, through directly amping the damage instead of making some weird hasted globals or something like that, makes Windwalker gameplay in general the same as it was in the past, maybe a bit slower, but that's all right. But it changes how we scale with the stat. Like, for example, the two biggest changes to scaling were Fist of Fury and Glory of the Dawn now scales with haste, like in the second part of the text.
Yes.
And that mastery is better now. Those, except the glory part, like the Fist of Fury scaling with haste and the mastery were almost exactly like that in the forum thread Cola mentioned earlier, like especially the mastery one. Like we had a lot of issues with mastery not being worth for us because the modifier to the mastery was way too low, and amping that by 20% is a really good way to making mastery now worth it over like versatility or critical strike, which is a really good thing. And I think they really understood how to do that.
Yeah, they really
Rework.
got. I think they got like they seem to have taken a lot of inspiration from that post that we mentioned, because we've mentioned this exact problem there and like suggested some tuning changes to it. They seem to have taken those changes very faithfully, and that should all in all mean that the very long-standing problem that Windwalker has, that gear has just been historically worse on Windwalker. You know, eye level increases just give us less of a percentage-based increase than most classes or most specs. That is probably going to be
Complete
addressed to a
opposite.
great degree. Maybe even complete opposite. Like obviously that depends on tuning, which is, you know, tuning is all over the place right now. There is definitely going to be changes in the momentum talents, maybe even the mastery modifier. We'll see. But yeah, there's a very good chance that gear on Windwalker will actually feel impactful, and we might not be super reliant on, you know, halfway tuning throughout half the season just to keep us afloat, which is, you know, that's just amazing. That's great.
Like the fact the
We
rework
might
was
not be
about
shit anymore in the early seasons.
the thing that I think it's a very strong bet they did, like revolving a rework about increasing the dependency on haste and mastery, which, as you said, was something very underestimated before. I think it's a very strong bet, and that probably explains, obviously, like as you said, the tuning is absurd right now, and like it's not just a rework about techniques and things like this. No, it's now about scaling and stats balance, I would say. So I think
Yeah,
it's
it's making the overall design more clean, more watertight.
yeah.
You know, where it felt throughout Dragonflight, like they had some initial ideas about what to change, what to bring back for the Dragonflight talent tree rework. Uh, they, you know, they came up with a bunch of conduits, covenant abilities, legendary powers, Azerite powers, and all of those were used as inspiration. But then they didn't really take the extra step of unifying all of those into a singular product, into a singular class fantasy, and sort of just threw them together, designed a functional talent tree with them, and sort of left it like that. And throughout beta and Dragonflight, that's always felt like a lot of it felt like either placeholder or unfinished, and that feeling never went away throughout the entirety of Dragonflight.
Yes.
This new tree for The War Within actually feels like a finished product, like someone actually thought about the totality, like the overall feel of the tree rather than just the individual components. And
Mhm.
that's great. It means that we actually have a proper game designer who made this, who thought about it.
Yeah, so what you said is like it's not just throwing few points like from previous expansions to just say, oh look, we put some Legion or whatever expansion capstones.
Yeah,
There is here a very clear reflection process. Like they thought about what could be, like you said, a finished product. Obviously, as any first version, there are things to improve, and that's completely fine, obviously. And
yeah,
I hope maybe this podcast, and I hope the maybe peak. I think like just side apart, the fact that people have read peak website shows the strong interest and the capacity of this website to actually, like it shows that actually people that write things on this website, there is like, because sometimes I know people are just like, complaining you don't know how to play monk because you play Mistweaver or whatever. Like, shout out to Color, for example. But like there is a real reflection behind this. So I think it's nice to maybe show the value of peak websites and peak Discord
yeah,
and peak people that are actually caring about the spec. And like maybe it's Reels or whatever developer that read the website, but um, I think it's very positive for the future. Like it's a
sure.
reliable source of information and improvement for Windwalker, and that's great.
I hope we can keep this flow going. Like, obviously, there is still a lot that feels rough on the edges, I guess. Not, I don't think like it already feels better than it does in Dragonflight. At least, I mean, I don't have alpha yet. I can't really say how it feels in terms of gameplay. I'm looking at more like how it feels in terms of design.
Yes.
But it already strikes me as a better balance than before. There is still a lot of sanding to be done, as
Mhm.
in there are still some niggles that you would like to figure out and
I think we shouldn't
bolts to
look at
tighten.
numbers yet, because I've seen
No,
like
I'm
on
not. I'm
Discord,
not talking
oh
about
look,
numbers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
look, it did like 1 million. I mean, it's fine,
Yeah.
but again, like it's an alpha. A lot of classes have been designed, reworked, and things like this. So obviously, you can't just look at numbers and say, okay, Windwalker is going to be. No, here we have
Yeah.
like a, and
yeah,
that's what I like to hear. We have like a very objective analysis of talents and just design. We're not talking about numbers. There is no sims or whatever. Like it's
yeah. It's
completely.
it's
No
it's more
point.
Not
about
yet.
the general feeling and
Yes.
the functionality. To be honest, like for example, they changed the auto attack interaction with spinning crane kick. I'm not sure if it was in the entire text, but like previously we could could cast another spell that was not the channel or a cast when the global of spinning crane kick was over. So spinning crane kick still channeled, but you casted another spell, but you couldn't auto attack during the channel of spinning crane kick, which actually blocked the auto attack if it was happened inside of it, resulting in a lot of lost auto attacks, which had negative impact on other things like Thunder Fist, for example. Now
So,
they changed it to not block auto attacks anymore, but you can't cast spells inside the spinning crane kick anymore, which is technically fine. But the issue is they didn't make it like it was for Expel Harm, for example, where you just couldn't cast the ability inside the spinning crane kick. They just made it so the spin crane kick is cancelled. Like that doesn't really feel well at all, and it results in you just macroing all of your abilities to not be castable during spinning crane kick, or in the worst situation, it may lead to some weird stuff that Call of finds out later, where you want to clip the last tick of your spinning crane kick for a higher damage per execution time spell, which can result in weird situations, and it's not really the best thing how it ended up now, but it's like we have day 3 or day 4 from alpha, so it's only a single change away from being a good change in the end. Like just
I think
blocking.
there's two ways.
Yeah,
Wait,
just blocking all your spells from being casted inside the spinning crane kick and making spinning crane kick not cancelable would be a good change, especially since the slightly slower pace of casting your spells after the spinning crane kick just fits with the general idea of taking the resource generation a bit back from the current one.
That would work. The other
Wait, so
one
you
would
just
be
said-
to make spinning crane kick 1 second static.
Yeah, that would also work.
You just said like we can't use spells within the spinning crane kick window anymore, right? I mean, if you do so, you
Well,
can cancel it.
Yeah,
can-
the change is
yeah.
that you cancel it now.
And with like 0% haste, you technically only lose the last tick, since the ticks happen at 0 seconds, 0.5, 1, and 1.5. So in most cases, you only lose the one tick at the end,
Well,
but
depending on
it's
lag,
still
I
like
think you might be able
25% of
to-
your spinning crane kick. So
Yeah.
Okay.
And
yeah,
it's
so
not
now it's
really the
spinning
best
crane kick
in
is just a
general.
frankly,
real
I
channel.
only. Yeah, like I only really realized that spinning crane kick was caster like sometime during Legion, I believe. Not Legion, Shadowlands. Like probably much later than it was actually a thing. So I think I could go back to just a full channel spinning crane kick rotation relatively easily. I just don't know if it's a good thing, because it means that your AoE rotation, if, as we hope, you still cast spinning crane kick very frequently as your main cheese surplus spender.
Mhm.
It means that you're spending a lot of time channeling, and that doesn't really matter for the auto attacks, because those will just continue now, but it means that you're no longer in the flow of pressing a button every second, like we are in single target. In single targets, you are very consistently pressing a button every second because of our static global cooldown. If that is being changed in AoE, I think that might throw a lot of people off, and not even in a way that's really easily identifiable for most people.
I'm not even sure about that, to be honest, especially since AoE in general has a
I'm just translating in
slightly lower CPM in most cases. Not in every content, of course, but in most contents, the CPM in AoE situations was already lower due to the higher chi consumption when including spinning crane kick into your priority. And I don't think it will throw people off a lot. But I think with the current implementation, it will result in a lot of people losing damage without knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
maybe it should be nice to have this on the tooltip, right? Like something clear.
Yeah, that's for sure. But to be honest, it should be fixed during the alpha or beta cycle to either just block all your abilities during it, and instead queuing them up for after the entire channel happens, or making the channel 1 second long, so you don't have the issue at all. Because it's not only the issue of losing damage in some situations, it's also the issue like we had with a lot of other things where the theory crafting ends up canceling shit out a lot because of specific damage amp windows that prioritize damage per execution time more than damage per second or damage per chi. And this might evolve into something really, really bad.
Yeah,
But
like imagine the Fist of Fury canceling in Serenity because it was just better or more efficient to get that last big Rising Sun kick in, right? To make use of the damage amps.
yeah,
If that sort of thing happened with every spinning crane kick or or many of your spinning crane kicks, it would be like a big mental overload for a lot of people, especially because we have a lot more small damage windows to track. Like if you have a bunch of acclamation stacks, for example, it might be worth canceling your spinning crane kick to get a really big strike of the Windlord in right before the acclamation stacks start falling off. Stuff like that is a
I think
bit
this
too
is something
much
they want. I think this
maintenance.
is something they want to avoid, actually, because if you
I think so
follow,
yeah,
too.
like, they remove Serenity. Maybe we can just look at the like the next couple of paragraphs. They remove
Yeah,
Serenity to make, like they said, a consistent window. So, like, I think Windwalker, correct me if I'm wrong, is probably one of the only spec we had to cancel a very, like Fist of Fury, for example, or the equivalent of like a spender of your resource.
I suppose that's
Um,
hard to say because we're one of the only specs we really
Yeah,
had
it's true. Yeah,
a standard that you can
but like
cancel.
maybe like canceling like a cast for something else, it's probably something a bit weird. And
Yeah,
maybe by making spinning crane kick working at the same way as the Fist of Fury, I'm sure they just want you to completely cast Fist of Fury, and I'm sure they want you to completely cast spinning crane kick to make something consistent. And I think so the consequence of this is clearly a reduction of APM, so action per
hmm
minutes. So it makes the gameplay a bit slower, and I think it's the way they want the Wii to be designed, like something a bit slower and like less buttons bloat, less things like this. And I think it makes sense if you look at this
that
way.
makes sense. Yeah. Especially because that's something that Babylonians has been very vocal about in his articles, that he preferred the slower play style that he was familiar with, especially before the Legion rework, I guess. Uh, I'm personally a bit in the middle of it because I do like my martial artist character to have some dynamic feel to it, which does involve pressing buttons quickly. But I also do like the methodical, planned out playstyle. So I'm sort of on both sides, I guess.
Yes.
I'm definitely more of the methodical person, but if I look at the tree, I think for single target that they are very, very close already to what we picture
Yeah,
as methodical but not too slow. So
for
like
sure.
as we started to describe, there is some maybe some consideration that we might need additional resources for AoE, but um, that is also something that we probably need to test more, I think. That there might be some problems where we starve quickly in AoE situations because also our main way of actually pressing buttons quickly during cooldowns is something that we hardly can use properly in AoE
Mhm.
situations,
Yeah.
being ordered elements. As an explanation, um, ordered elements is the buff that we can get from a talent through Rising Sun Kick that reduces our other chi costs for 5 seconds by 1. And
Yep.
in AoE, you basically need a pact. You need to go into that with max chi in order for it to even be worth to cast Rising Sun Kick. Otherwise, you would just forego that window completely.
Yeah, in order to be like chi neutral with that talent, you need to cast at least 2 chi spenders in that window, because otherwise you're just casting Resistance on Kick in AoE, which wouldn't make any sense. In order to make it a good talent and like to give it actual value, you would have to cast 3 chi spenders so that you're actually gaining chi from casting Rising Sun Kick.
Hmm.
And that can be the solution to feeling chi starved in AoE. But that's 3 chi spenders in 5 seconds, which means you only have time for 2 mastery breakers as well as chi generators. So you probably need to go into that with high chi, and then, for example, something like spinning crane kick, tiger paw, spinning crane kick, tiger paw, spinning crane kick. So a window like that would be, chi positive as well as still AoE focused. But then if you have something like Fist of Fury, which is a general, I just forgot because you can't even do 3 spinning crank kicks in 5 seconds if they are a channel as well. So that's gonna be a whole thing too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think honestly the 5-second window might be slightly too long, too short for, especially with the spinning crank kick channel, because otherwise you're probably just gonna end up doing something like Rising Sun Kick only if you can follow it up with Strike of the Wind Lords, and then one spinning crane kick, and then hopefully end it with a Fist of Fury or something. And I don't know, like that window should not feel too restrictive. I feel like that window should be long enough that you don't feel like you're wasting your time by pressing Rising Sun Kick the entire time.
Yeah, maybe like
It's a
it
very
looks like something
balance to
very
strike.
single target anyway focused, this talent. Like when you look at the tooltip, resistance kick, backup kick, is it meant to be used in AoE, this talent actually? Maybe for the key
I think
reduction,
so.
but
Well, maybe they just didn't really plan it for single target or AoE specifically. I think they mainly put it into to get the sense of weapons of order back in because we asked for that, so they gave us that, which is great. This is essentially the gameplay effects that weapons of order had on your rotation. Like people may remember weapons of order as being a giant mastery buff, which it was, but
mm,
mastery doesn't change your priority or your rotation, right? What the effect of weapons of order was the chi cost reduction on your rising sun kicks, because that actually changes how you play. And this is exactly that. This is just weapons of order without the mastery buff,
mhm.
except it's tied into Stormwind and Fire.
Because to me, like the AoE part, like when you look at activating Storm and Fire, grants two key. I think maybe it's to avoid this, like, oh, you have to build before starting your Storm and Fire window because now you can just press Storm and Fire into one target palm, and you have already like four, maybe five key instantly, and you don't have like to do like the preparation of your key resource before pressing Storm and Fire. So maybe it's because maybe like in AoE they wanted to completely ignore the first, like the fact that you have the key cost reduction by Rose and Sun Kick, but just maybe the two grand key. I don't know. Maybe it's that, or maybe it's, as you said, it's not meant to any AoE or single target. It's
Well,
just
Yeah. Like there was a
it's
time where we played Kyrian in AoE, right? Like during season 1, most
yes.
Windwalkers chose Kyrian because it was the best rating covenant. So a lot of people also played Keys with Kyrian because it was not realistic to change yet, or to swap covenants. So we do have a whole season of data about playing this particular effect in AoE, and yes, it did turn out that you do press Rising Sun Kick in AoE, even if you only get 2 spenders after that, because that's not ideal, but at least it's chi neutral, and then if it's chi neutral, then well, at least you got the Rising Sun Kick worth of damage out, so that's still positive in terms of damage.
especially when you have to consider that we are not in season 3 anymore. So it's not like you press a single ability every global anymore. So you
Yeah.
still, you now have gaps in TWW or whatever, and you can fill those gaps during your burst with chi neutral Rising Sun Kick, which also makes casting Whirling Dragon Punch suddenly a lot easier, I think, because when you have it on CD, you don't have to actually spend the chi for Rising Sun Kick, which does not really much damage in AoE, and still get the benefit from a Whirling Dragon Punch, and that's a good part. And especially the start of every burst with 2 additional chi, which you can spend right away for a Rising Sun Kick to get another 2 chi back because of the refunding thing, still nets you 2 positive chi in the end.
Mhm.
And especially during your burst, it's hella good to have front-loaded chi generation to be able to sync your damage windows a lot better. Especially, you have to consider you need to cast Rising Sun, Kick, Fist of Fury, and Strike of the Windlord, because you want the Whirling Dragon Punch and the Dance of GG inside the Gale Force window of Strike of the Windlord. So you already have like 7 chi you have to spend in the first place. And using Aurate Elements is basically 4 chi net positive in this case, because the Rising Sun Kick is for free and you get the chi reduction for Fist of Fury and Strike of the Windlord. So it's in the end, it's more than just the 2 chi at the start of every Storm of Fire. It's like 4 chi. Depends how you count it, of course. So especially the burst will be a lot easier with it. The question is just if the point spend is actually worth it, or if another talent will be better mathematically.
This is also sort of to make up for the fact that Serenity is no longer a thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
what you have now in the Season 3 and basically for all Dragonflights is that when you pop your Serenity, you get into an entirely different rotation because you don't have to worry about Chi, which definitely feels like a lot faster. You can actually pop off all your high priority spells without having to concern yourself with, do I have enough resources for this? That really speeds things along. That's why Serenity, or at least it's in large part why Serenity is such a good burst spell, despite it having a relatively low damage modifier, because you don't have to like alternate every attack with a Tiger Palm to get enough resources going. Something like Ordered Elements is essentially the good compromise between having no resources and, less resources to worry about. Because of one of the issues that people had, or at least that some people had with Serenity, is that it feels silly to suddenly deactivate the entire resource mechanic on your class, because you no longer worry about energy, you no longer worry about chi. So, but that is supposed to be like the pillars of Windwalker gameplay, so why are we turning that off in the most important moment? Which is a fair criticism, I think. And this is the answer to that. You no longer ignore your resources, you're just using them more efficiently. You still need to keep your energy recharging, you still have chi to worry about, but you can also cast your abilities faster because you still have more resources to spend. So yeah, I love this talent.
Yeah, it's pretty nice, especially since I was on the side of Weapons of Order was a better Serenity.
Yeah.
So I really like that it shows up now, especially since it's a fun coincidence that they just decided to use the best part of Weapons of Order and the best part of Fallen Order, which was only the icon. I really love this. Not going to lie.
Yeah. There is one thing I want to point out, and that's that I am going to miss Serenity's theme or style, I guess, because I'm not a huge fan of splitting into 3, thematically speaking, and I do really like the idea of like unleashing your inner chi visually. That looked really awesome, and I love it. And I'm kind of sad to see that go. I sort of wish that there was something to bring that back. But yeah, that's a nitpick, and that's entirely in terms of theme and visual design. So not the highest priority, I suppose.
I can even understand this part because especially Storm of Fire is used to be known as the one of the buggiest abilities we have as Windwalkers. And like for example, we have on the left side we have Jade Ignition, and Jade Ignition was a talent now in Dragonflight. It will be a talent in War Within, and it was a legendary in Shadowlands, and it never worked with Storm of Fire. Like it was always just reduced by Storm of Fire, but the clones don't copy it, and therefore using Storm of Fire and Jade Ignition together was never a good idea.
Yeah,
And
that needs clarification, I think. So when you activate Storm of Fire, you as a player have your damage reduced, right? I don't know if you have the tooltip for Storm of the
Yeah,
Fire up
sure.
here
Yeah,
on
yeah.
your screen right now.
It's a split. Yeah,
So
42.
yeah, so your damage is reduced to 42% of your normal damage. Why that is a good thing is because there's now 3 of you, so you're 3 people doing 42% of damage, so you're doing a total of 126% damage. So your overall damage is essentially increased by 26%, and it's a pretty significant damage buff as far as damage buffs go. However, that does mean that if there are spells that the clones cannot reproduce, then they need to be coded to not be reduced, and ideally even separately buffed. Something like, for example, Chi Burst. Chi Burst used to be cast by clones, which was a huge issue, and it meant that you now not just had to worry about you not pulling shit with your Chi Burst, but your clones who are firing their Chi Burst in random directions also not pulling shit, which was basically impossible. So they changed that, they removed Chi Burst from the replicated spells, and instead just made it so that Chi Burst was buffed by 26% if you cast during Storm of the Fire. For some reason, they forget to apply that same philosophy to everything. I think, for example, something like Thunder Fist is probably not buffed by Storm of the Fire, even though your damage during Storm of the Fire should just all be buffed. I'm not Circumstruct at the window, but
Yeah.
specifically Thunder Fist, yeah. And in the worst case, like with Jade Ignition, they remember that your damage is reduced during Storm of the Fire, but they forget that it should also be replicated by the clones to make that work. For Jade Ignition, they forgot to do that. And they haven't realized their mistake or bothered to fix it for a very long time. This is not just a Dragonflight issue, this is also a Shadowlands issue. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that is something that absolutely needs to be fixed, especially if Storm of the Fire is the only way to go.
I think I
And
talk
such things happens a lot. Like in the Shadow Pantry, you have a talent that makes you penetrate 10% of the armor of your enemy, but your clones don't do it.
No,
They just forget about that.
Yeah, the thing is, I hope, like, I think I talk about this coding issue on Discord quickly. As I said, it might simplify the way they design the code, because when you have like Storm of Fire and Serenity, which are completely two different philosophies. So as you said, Storm of Fire is just it's a flat damage buff. It's basically this, and
in
Serenity
terms of
is
value, yes.
yeah, and like when you look at the tool, it's just a flat damage budge, but Serenity was a completely different rotation and shit, so they had like to have, I don't know, maybe some different loops and shit like this. It was messy. So I hope like by removing Serenity, so they said it's obviously about to make Windwalker more consistent burst windows and damage. But I think it's also due to I hope for some, I would say, simplification of coding. And I remember as well in Shadowland, Serenity was completely bugged. Didn't work at all, if I remember correctly, right? That's why we never took it.
Serenity?
I
No,
think there
Serenity
was
was just terrible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it
was
was not
terrible,
opportune.
but not really bugged. It was just underwhelming percentage-wise, especially since we
okay.
had
I thought it was bugged. Yeah, that's it.
fixate conduit for the clones, which netted more damage gain in the end than just picking Serenity, for example.
They
Like
never made that
the one
conduit
thing you have
properly
always
balanced.
to keep in mind is that Sum of Fire is always the higher damage imp, and always was. Like Serenity was always slightly lower, but the gain from it was the CDR, and we didn't need the CDR in Shadowlands that much. Or more, the difference in damage amp was higher than the CDR gained us.
Okay.
Right.
And I think the biggest reason why they remove Serenity now is more the resource thing. Like especially now in Dragonflight, especially now in this current season, you have to consider like we have 15% uptime, I think, from Serenity. And outside of Serenity, you can't even consume as many resources as you get currently.
Yeah.
And Serenity is one of the big issues in this. Like, it makes you not consume resources for the entire duration of it, and to cap out on both chi and energy during the buff up time,
Yeah.
which
So
is
every
not really
90
healthy.
seconds, you get a full recharge on all of your resources, which basically just means even during the time that you're not pressing Serenity or not using Serenity, you still are benefiting from that large buff or that large influx of resources that it gave you. It's like if you were playing Storm with a Fire, and you're kind of thinking like, wow, it's really easy to spend my resources just consistently. I don't have to really worry about casting Tiger Palm on cooldown, or like keep my energy recharging because I don't need all that chi. But then I also just get 5 free chi every time I press Storm with Fire. That just feels like overkill. And that's
Yeah.
kind of how Serenity plays.
I think the Blizzard philosophy about this was Serenity was underperforming in Shadowland. They wanted to bring it back in Dragonflight, but they had this resource overload issue, and now the philosophy is about scaling value and things like this, and like fixing resource overload, like bring Monk back to the way the Monk should be considered, so key management, energy management. And by
Yeah,
removing Serenity, they align with those objectives. So I think it's fine. They just try
yeah, I
different
agree.
things, and now I think they how to say, there's someone that looked at the spec and made good
Yeah.
decisions.
Like this someone who probably remember, or at least understands what we were talking about when we say we remember, how Windwalker used to be about chi management. And chi management was, one of the 3 large pillars of Windwalker gameplay that defined your skill as a Windwalker. It was the uh, s- managing your resources, managing your short cooldowns, your Rise and Sun Kick, Fist of Fury, etc., and your blackout usage. Those were the 3 pillars of Windwalker gameplay.
Well, technically also mastery usage, but
Yeah, but that's
that comes with the
that's like
design of the
that's like
entire
that's like the
spec, yeah.
floor that the pillars stand on.
Yeah, probably.
The point being that if you never cap your energy, if you never overflow your chi, if you keep your Rising Sun Kick and your Fist of Fury on cooldown, and if you spend your surplus chi with Blackout Kick correctly, then you are probably optimizing your Windwalker. That was kind of the benchmarks that you could compare yourself to. But in Dragonflight, that's sort of watered down because you had too many resources to never waste any. You had like your Rising Sun Kick and your Fist of Fury started resetting out of nowhere, so it's almost impossible to keep them on cooldown the entire time.
Yeah.
And the result of that being that your blackout kick is that's I would say that's the pillar that remained mostly intact, but without the other 2 is sort of meaningless.
It was glory
Yeah,
of
and
the
that
dawn and
complexity was
OPS.
replaced. And that complexity was replaced in season 3 by just adding so many procs
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
different things that you always had basically 6 different abilities to keep in mind, which didn't feel great.
Yeah, and like no realistic way to spend them all optimally because you just had no idea at any one time what the best spell to press was. Like you could learn, I suppose, but if you get into a situation where your Rising Sun Kick and your Fist of Fury are naturally off cooldown, or just got reset by teachings of the monastery or something, uh, and you just procced a natural blackout reinforcement, but you already have a Dance of Chi-Chi rolling, and you're trying to cast your Whirling Dragon Punch on top of that, like what do you do? What is the correct?
Yeah.
Do you start casting your Rising Sun Kick and Fist of Fury first and risk losing another Dance of Chi-Chi proc, or do you cast your Dance of Chi-Chi proc first, but that should override your Blackout reinforcement, or do you spend your Blackout reinforcement first, but hey, you have a 4 set, so now all the cooldown reduction goes to waste.
I'm wondering, can you,
You know,
because like there is a big variance coming from that issue with so many procs and so many decision making. I'm wondering if you can actually compare this variance in DPS like if we took for example the Serenity burst window on pool of any bosses, whatever, I'm pretty sure you can actually just on this small window, which is very small, but obviously you have to consider the whole remaining fights, procs,
Hmm.
reset and shit. I'm wondering if you can actually assess the the variance, like the because it's not consistent due to so many procs. Like I remember, for example, I talk about Red Paladins because it has been the one of the latest melee rework, and I played it slightly a bit, and you can really see their damage are very consistent, very consistent. Like the window is just the same. Like there is no really reason to have big variance, but for Monk, it's completely absurd. I don't know if you can actually mathematically, uh, like imagine like a case where, I mean, obviously the sim will show you that, but I wonder if we have a data about this. Like
Are you
for
talking about
example,
like peaks in the damage profile?
yeah, like for example, if you have like so many reset of Resin Sunkick during your burst window, comparing to someone, for example, that doesn't have any blackout kick proc from the tier set or no Kiji proc that will bring you your blackout kick reduction from the tier set. I mean, I'm pretty sure you
I think
can
it's
actually.
something that Babylonius once brought up in one of his articles when he was talking about the flaws of Windwalker,
Yeah.
where he basically talked about all of the different events that could happen at any one time. Like uh, the amount of branching events from a single input, and it's because there are so many random variables like a Jade Firestomp reset, a Glory of the Dawn proc, a Dance of Chi proc, a tier set proc, and then you start adding all of those together. It was something in the hundreds of different things that could happen because of that, just from a single button press,
Yeah, so it's
which is
very.
silly, of course, because
Yeah.
that's stretching the limits of reasonability. But it's still funny to imagine that so much randomness has been introduced in a spec that was previously known for being very static and predictable.
So you talk about Jade Firestomp. Maybe we can go just keep on
Yeah,
looking at this philosophy because
pe-
time is running. What do you
in
think
terms of
about this
skill.
comment about the reset mechanic removal in favor of static cooldown?
So what they did was they changed Jade Firestomp basically completely because there is no longer a reset mechanic at all. So it still looks the same. Like you press it and you think that okay, it looks exactly the same as it used to be. It still draws a pattern on the ground and with a branching, well, what do you call it? Chi
Branch.
Jade Fire thing, whatever. But standing in that only gives you a speed buff, a movement speed buff. It does nothing else. Casting in it gives you no benefit. There is no more reset from standing in it. In return, they reduce the cooldown to 15 seconds, which is not reflected in this tooltip, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that's confirmed on alpha. It's now a 15-second cooldown standard, and that's it. It's just cast every 15 seconds. It's a free cast. It doesn't do an insane amount of damage, but it does enable its follow-up talents, such as Jadefire Harmony, to apply Jadefire Brand. So you have a 15-second cooldown to apply a 10-second debuff that increases your damage to that target by 12%. Pretty good. You can expect to have 67% uptime on that if you press your Jadefire Stomp on cooldown. And then you have the other side, the choice node, to make that
Yes.
Jadefire Stomp a little bit better in AoE or to make it a little bit better in single target.
Yeah,
And
but which
the
is
AoE one is
badly
probably
made.
terrible. Yeah.
Both are terrible. The issue is Jetfire Stomp consists of two hits. The first initial, and then the so-called Windwalker hit, because it was the Windwalker only mechanic in Shadowlands,
Mhm.
which is the second hit, which is marginally stronger than the first hit. The issue is that both of the talents only apply to the initial hit.
Right.
which
I
makes it
I do not
completely
understand why they
bad.
still haven't removed that secondary hit. The secondary hit was already vestigial in Dragonflight, and now they took the time to like rework the whole ability and they just left it in. That's really weird.
Yeah, especially with Jetfire Harmony in mind. Like, the biggest issue I have with it is like the hard cap of 5 makes
Yeah.
Jetfire Harmony predictable to only be applied to 5 targets, but it can be applied by the Windwalker hit as well, and the Windwalker hit doesn't have to hit the initial targets you hit with Jadefire Storm. So the target cap of Jadefire Harmony ranges between 5 and 10.
Yeah, with a spike,
Entirely
like a
RNG.
sort of a bell curve from 5 up to 7 and down to 10.
And it's like you when you hit the pack of 10 targets, you can't even guarantee that all of those 10 targets are debuffed.
If you look at the tooltip again, Quack, so
Yes.
what you can see is that it says the initial hit just hits 5 targets. Okay, cool. And then up to 5 targets will suffer an additional hits, just one hit. Those 2 sets of 5 are essentially random. They pick their targets at random if there are more than 5 targets to hit. So like Jersey said, if you're 10 targets, you do your Jade Firestorm, the first hit hits 5 random targets, and then the second hit also hits 5 random targets. That's not intuitive, right? Like, and I think any player would assume that hits the same 5 targets. But that's not how it works. And honestly, like I said, there is no reason to have that secondary hit. In terms of value, it's just 1 hit for 105% attack power. There is no reason to have that second hit. The only reason that the secondary hit is there is because they had to have some kind of variance when it had to work for 3 different specs, and this was the DPS addition to that spell. It should just be combined. It's super silly. And why have it a 5 hard cap anyway? Why would you? This could only make it worse in AoE. There's no way that you could make this work in AoE if it doesn't hit everything, because then it would just not be good enough if there's 15 targets in the pool.
I don't really see the point of this Path of Jade, singularly focused Jade, when you look at Jadefire Harmony, which is clearly
Well,
better.
if it worked on both hits, then it would be a pretty good hit. Like, then you would have a free hit every 15 seconds that deals about 525% attack power.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Like, that's a pretty strong hit. But it doesn't, because it says the initial hit now strikes 1 target, deals 500%. But that initial hit is the smaller one of the two. Like, that's the 40% portion of the 105% total. Yeah, that's not enough. That means that the total hit is now 265%, and that's not very good. I mean, that's fine. It's like what, half of Fist of Fury or something.
Less, especially with momentum.
Yeah.
A boost. Fist of Fury hits for more now, but Fist of Fury was like 750% attack power now.
Yeah.
With the Wall Within tuning, and actually it's, give me a second, I have the scaling sheet where I have it.
Point being, it's too weak, and like it shouldn't be, because it means that you just don't play it. It's like you just won't go into the nodes, and they might as well throw it away.
That's such for like the latest node of the tree. Like in the philosophy of class design, you shouldn't have like, but because in Dragonflight was the
in my
issue.
opinion, in design, in terms of design, I consider Jade Firestorm to be the capstone. Like, I don't think Path of Jade or Singularly Focused Jade could ever be tuned to the point where they feel like the real capstone. Jade Firestorm is the capstone, and the other two are improvements to it. Just like Whirling Dragon Punch is the capstone, and Revolving Whirl is the addition to Whirling Dragon Punch. Although, of course, Sky Touch is its own thing. That's a proper capstone.
They just again missed out on making Jade Firestorm really work nicely with our kit. Like, for example, it again has no interaction with our resource system, which is a shame, to be honest. Like, Whirling Dragon Punch doesn't have this interaction as well, but it at least has the interaction of you need to keep Rising Sun Kick and Fist of Fury on CD, making it a combo-like spell.
Yeah. It
But
brings us back to
Jade
those
Fire
three
Stomp is
pillars, right?
just Jade Fire Stomp is just a really boring
Damage amp.
yeah, damage amp you have to apply on CD basically, or to just delay it slightly for other windows or something like that. But it's a very boring spell, and
Yeah.
that
Which is the same
didn't
for
has
Levels.
changed at all. It at least is a lot better than now in Dragonflight or than it was in Shadowlands due to not having the reset mechanic. But it's still fucking boring, and they should have either reworked it more or
Yeah.
just yeeted it.
I think we can compare this state to DH momentum. Like, or I don't know if it's initiative or momentum, the one that increase your damage buff, because they have to use an ability to proc it, and it's like nice to have some replacement because they need then to dash. For example, they do this, they just do their vengeful retreat. This activates the damage amp, and then for example they just fail rush. So like this damage amplification is, like in the rotation, it makes sense. It's not just something you have to press just to say, okay, you have to press it. I don't like this as well. Like to have this technique to press the cooldown, but without any interaction. Yeah,
Any thoughts? There is no
it's just
there
that.
there is a single reason to not press it as soon as it comes up, and that is if you know that in the 5 second downtime you're going to have some strong spells. And I mean that is something, but it's not enough. It really needs to interact with the rest of the kits more.
Yeah,
Like well, I talked about those three pillars. Jadefire Stomp doesn't interact with any of them. It doesn't affect your blackout kick spending. It doesn't affect your resources, and it doesn't affect your short CDs, or it's not affected by your short CDs. It is a short CD, but it doesn't change the balance. There was a suggestion floating around on Peak of Serenity that we can kind of hit two birds with one stone, because we have Last Emperor's Capacitor kind of dangling on the left side there,
yeah,
which is just a bit too far to reach, especially for a talent that's pretty considerably undertuned. Even though now that we are more limited on resources, we should technically have windows where it would be worth casting a free, chonky hit. But it's just too weak for that, most likely, because it is too hard to reach at this point. So what if we just put Last Emperor's Capacitor where Jadefire Stomp is, and then make the follow-up talents work with Last Emperor's Capacitor instead? Like, say that the follow-up talents, the choice node is now Crackling Jade Lightning, pulses some percentage of its damage to targets around the main target. Or on the other end of the choice node, you say that, Crackling Jade Lightning now goes up by 110% per stack for every P you spend, or Chi spender you cast. And then maybe the Jadefire Harmony could be replaced with something like your if you spend at least 15 stacks on your Crackling Jade Lightning, your targets take 12% increased damage from you for 15 seconds or something. Probably have to make it a bit longer, because obviously Last Emperor's Capacitor takes a lot longer to charge than 15 seconds. But, it's something like you could make all of those things work with a Crackling Jade Lightning cast instead, which
yes.
would make the Last Emperor's Capacitor a lot more accessible. And it would get rid of Jade Firestorm, which a lot of people don't really like casting. So I think it's a great solution.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
that's for
like it
sure.
why they did like mix Jetfire Stomp and Harmony at the same time, because like this Jetfire Stomp itself is just, and if you don't take Jetfire Harmony, Jetfire Stomp is useless.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's way
I
too
mean,
weak to cast on its own.
there is no, like, if you don't take that's my issue, because I think when it's a capstone, the capstone itself should be sufficient,
Yeah,
but like you have to
just like
take
Whirling
this one.
Dragon Punch.
Yeah,
should be worth casting without it also triggering a Dancer Chiji at the end, right?
Yes.
Jadefire Stomp, if you choose to take it without Jadefire Harmony or the other two, should be worth casting, and it just isn't. So it's failed as a talent.
Yeah, maybe
It
they
didn't
just
pass the
wanted
vibe
to.
check.
I don't know. I think they just wanted this for this philosophy to keep some Shadowland flavor and.
I'm sure, yeah. But like even during Shadowlands, it wasn't particularly popular. Like I
Yeah.
played it, it was okay, but even then the reset mechanic was annoying as shit to deal with. But
I
like,
think the biggest reason why they kept it is because of the looks. They put so much
yeah,
work into
looks
the
great.
looks, into the initial one, which still looks very great, and
Yeah.
also the new one, which also looks great on its own. It just has issues to not be very visible beyond some other ground effects.
Which we've talked about before. We don't need to get back into that. And the thing is, like, Mistweaver still has it. Like, it's not going to go to waste if it is removed from the Windwalker toolkit. Just let Mistweavers have it and let us have something else. Give Crackling Jade Lightning a really cool a really cool visual. If you stack up enough Last Emperor's stacks, that could be really cool.
You can legit just include those into each other and just transform Crackling Jade Lightning to Fairline Stomp with picking up the talent and including the stacking mechanic to Jetfire Stomp to get the damage amp it really needs in the end, and the resource interaction through the cheese pandas stack it up. So you can still use the looks and the entire mechanic of it. Just use the damage amp and the stacking mechanic of last amp cap for it. Would perfectly work fine, I think. The only issue is you would in the end lose your only
There's something
ability
to do
to.
because this talent has been like completely forgotten since Shadowland. Like no one was taking the legendary, no one was playing it in Dragonflight, and no one will play.
No one has placed this since Legion. Legion is the last time this thing was relevant.
Okay.
And even during Legion, it was even relatively popular, mostly because of its numerical strength. But generally, people look back on it fondly. How much of that is rose-tinted glasses? I don't know, but give it a chance at least, and make it castable for ball moving, please.
Last MCAP, I think the only real issue why we didn't consider it during Shadowlands was tuning, and the only real issue why we didn't consider it during Dragonflight wasn't really the tuning. It was more that we had just no space in our priority for it. Like it wasn't better than your big spenders, which had a lot less cooldown than it had in the past. In most cases, especially now in season 3, and now with War Within, it will have some space in the priority again. Did you a lot less cheat generation and not having Serenity at all? So it will have its place. The question is just if the tuning for the point is worth picking up the point.
I think that is currently the Jadefire Stomp aside. Last Emperor's Capacitor would probably be played in its current iteration if it were in a more reachable position. I think the position is currently what's holding it back most.
In Dragonflight or War Within?
No, in War Within.
Oh, yeah. Well, both would be true, yeah.
Yes,
well, but yeah, that's like I think in this position it's as dead as Xuan's Bond is. Like, or for example, the 2-pointers. I also think the 2-pointers are in a bad position and therefore almost considered a dead talent. Like we have, if you look at the tree, like 5 or 6 talents that are just like, okay, if they don't buff it in an appropriate way, they are just dead. Like Jade Ignition will be dead. I'm pretty sure Martial Mixture will be also dead. Last MCAP won't be played a lot. Rising Star, Crane Vortex, Crans Bond, and maybe even Meridian Strikes. Like there are like 6 or 7 talents already that are in a position where they need a lot of help by the tuning to be a pick at all,
Yeah.
which is kind of sad. But
I'm
on the
not
other
that
hand,
sad
it's
about Meridian Strikes, to be honest.
yeah,
like,
it's okay
yeah.
to have such talents, I think. But
Yeah, maybe we can talk about
Yeah.
Touch of Death now for the last general,
sounds
I
good.
would say, comment before we go into more details, because it's been 1 hour and a half and we're still on the general part. But that's nice.
Alright.
So you talk about Meridian Strike. Maybe so the idea when you look at the philosophy post was about replacing the Touch of Death gameplay with a more execute focused version through call tree capper instead of the AoE and repeat cast components. So yeah, what do you think about this Touch of Death?
I think what they're talking about there is the Fatal Touch talent in the end of the class tree, because of the 5% damage increase that you get from casting it, which I think is it only to the target or is it to you as
it's
a player?
a buff on you.
Yeah,
So
okay.
it's
So
buff on you.
that's decent. It's probably gonna be nice in keys, I guess, just because you can execute something and then do more damage to everything else. You know, that's good. It's still going to be very insignificant, I think, because 5% isn't a lot, and without AoE, Touch of Death itself is also not a lot, even if it's only a 1 minute 30 cooldown.
It is 1 minute 30. I think it is still a lot in its own, because don't forget that Touch of Death generates 3G.
Does it still?
And yeah, it does. And this, especially in M+, this will be a lot.
Yeah.
Like, especially, it won't happen at the start of a pull. It will happen like 15 or 20 seconds in. And that's the moment you will end up being a bit chi-starved.
That's true.
And Touch of Death with like, yeah, okay, what's the max HP right now? We are around 1 million, so I think in War Within we will end up like 1.5 or something like that. So it's still, with the 35% hit, it's still like around 1 million in the end. Due to the amps, so it will be still a good button to press, and generates chi, which will be pretty nice. And in the end, especially the 5% damage amp is kind of nice.
Yeah.
I
Is
think.
it good enough to value a whole other talent point to make it shorter? That's the real question.
In the class tree, for sure, yeah.
In the spec tree.
No, in the Spectre, I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think the damage amp for it is way too low, and the CDR for it, it's still the 0.35 or something.
Yeah.
Which it is on live right now, and that's
might push it down to about 1 minute, maybe.
Yeah, I think a 1 minute or 1 minute 10 or something like that was the conclusion usually, but that
That's
doesn't
so
really
easily
help in M+.
wasted, right?
So
Like,
it's not really a good
CDR
talent.
on Touch of Death is very easily wasted because the odds of something being in Touch of Death range every 1 minute 10 is obviously not that high. You need to have something to use it on.
I much prefer the what they are planning with it, because
I do too, because I don't like Fatal Flying Guillotine that much. I just don't think it will be a very
my main
significant
worry is, I think it would be nicer if it wasn't on the execution but just on casting it. To give that damage bonus also for raid fights. I would.
The damage bonus is after being cast.
Oh, it's on cast. I
Yeah,
thought it
it's
was an
just a cast,
execution.
yeah.
No, it's
no,
just
then.
it's just
Then
cast.
That actually gives me an idea. What if you could just use it whenever? Like, maybe make it reduce damage if it's used on higher health targets, but then at least you could activate the health buff or the damage buff whenever you want, and you could get the G whenever you want. Wouldn't that be more useful?
Yeah, for sure. But I don't. I think the idea of Touch of Death as an execution ability is thematically fitting.
I suppose.
I think they could have reworked Touch of Death a lot better with the rework I posted in the forum chat we talked about earlier, which would allow to include talents like warriors have. where you can use the execution ability above the 35% max HP mark with specific procs. And I think this way Touch of Death would have worked a lot better for our spec. But I think it is the easiest way how they did it, and just made it okay, yeah, you press it for a single target because you can only touch the single target with the execution or Touch of Doom kick. But I think it's the lazy way in the end how they did it.
Yeah.
And they could have made it a lot better. But yeah,
I'm thinking about
I
also
think
the fact, like in raid, like when the boss is around 15% HP mark, or like it's pretty huge actually. Like this damage amplification
Perhaps.
for raid. I don't know. I don't know. We didn't talk a lot,
In
but
Rage, you're never going to get it off, though.
oh yeah.
Like in Rage, you're gonna use it once on the fight, and then you have 10 seconds of 5% increased damage.
Well,
If that
it
doesn't line
comes
up
down
your
to the
spells, then
it comes down to the boss design in the end. Like, for example, when you look at how the current council fight works, where you have to kill all at the same time, basically, but in the end, it's not relevant how low you bring the bosses before they die. It often ends up like Ursuk will be a much lower than the other two, just because melees stack on it, and we usually hit like 15% and then call to swap the damage onto the other targets. And for such a fight style, the Touch of Death with this amp would be pretty great, because you can just touch on Urzuk, swap the DPS to the other, get the gain on it, or for example, any fight that includes any type of ads, like for example Sakharov, where you can easily get a lot of DPS out of this buff just by touching a single target and then going with the 5% on the boss.
Yes.
Or Razageth, for example, same or
yeah, as long as
like
you have
every
an
end
ad,
boss.
I think also it makes the Touch of this use a bit wiser. Like if you can actually min max this damage. I know it's 5%, but 5% instead of 5%, right? You can actually think sometimes like, okay, I will press it, but then I have big cooldown window coming. So if you have a big cooldown window coming, you can press, but if it's like, you have 45 seconds before you are on a Xuen or Storm of Fire, I don't know, I'm just thinking about any situation. You can maybe say, okay, I will hold it, but also it's boss design, obviously, so you can just press it on cooldown and get 5% damage increase on boss.
I kind of wish it was a bigger amp. I think if it were a bigger amp, I'd be more excited about it. I think 5% is not enough.
I think it's if it would be a spec talent, it should be bigger.
Yeah.
But since it's just a class talent, I think the CDR from 3 minutes to 1.5, and on top the 5% in a single talent is okay. Like when you look at the other damage talents in the class tree, there aren't many of them, and most of them are pretty marginal in the end. The only big one is Fast Feet, which is pretty wide, pretty much up the tree on the top right, with the 70% increased damage to Rising Sun Kick and 10% for a Spinning Crane Kick.
Yeah.
This is the only really significant damage amp in the entire class tree
I
for
didn't
us.
think about it, but they've removed Eye of the Tiger, huh?
Oh, true.
Yep.
Wait a second.
No more, no more random trinkets procs.
It's not baseline. Just
maybe we can do like a quick talk about this class tree, because we didn't mention it. I don't want to go into much detail, so we can actually focus on the spec tree.
Sure.
What I've seen, like this is my like 2-3 things I've seen. So obviously, Eye of Tiger removed, the statue, which is now passive, which I think I guess it's nice. I don't know. I mean, it's one button less, so I guess it's pretty cool.
Yeah, the big gain from the statue change is actually the decrease in duration and increase in tick damage.
Yeah. It's
Like they
overall
cut
it's
it down
unbearable.
from 30-second duration to 10 and amped the damage from 25% of attack power to 50. So in the end, it's still worse than it was, but now it's a lot less likely that you miss out on ticks because packs are moved around because the duration is such a short one.
Yeah.
But it's still a fucking lazy talent, and they should have remade it entirely.
Yeah, and even in its best iteration, I just don't really like how it looks. Like
Yeah.
summoning
It's
your
a shit
tiger
talent.
drops a statue. I
And like they could have just made it okay. Yeah, the white tiger statue now empowers your Xuan,
yeah,
and
exactly.
instead the Ketyu in itself pulses, your Xuan deals more damage with crackling tiger lightning because Xuan actually has already a pulsing effect that does some type of AOE since it's target kept at 3, and they could have just made the Ketyu empower your Xuan instead of being another pet or totem in this case that deals damage. It's just such a
And also doesn't scale with mastery.
Yeah.
Doesn't scale with mastery. I don't like the theme behind it. Like that's something I usually do at least think about when, especially for active or visible things on your screen. Why can I just pull a statue out of my ass and plop it on the ground? Where did that come from? What's the lore behind that? Is it a chi ability? Is it is it literally a physical object that I'm carrying around? What was that?
Xuan is carrying the statue for you.
Yeah, I mean,
Statue,
Zwen is already kind of stretching the the limitations of what a monk should be able to do. I don't particularly have a great explanation for why I can summon a small Zuan. I could maybe headcanon it so that it's a blob of chi that you're giving us some level of autonomy, and then just shaped it like Zuen as sort of a homage to your teacher or something. I can kind of work with that, but statue, nah, that just doesn't feel like worth the effort to try and find an explanation for.
And in the end, it's also it was one of the laziest things.
Yeah,
they brought in Dragonflight. Like they saw, okay, yeah, we have a statue for Brewmasters, we have one for Mistweavers, we need one for Windwalkers.
Yeah, true.
And they didn't think of any utility or anything or any good damage amp, and instead it's just a random ass pulse in a pretty short range that doesn't feel great at all, doesn't interact with any of our mechanics. No resource interaction,
Even like
no mastery interaction.
Even Blackhawk statue was just like Brewmaster never took it, and you use it for like
but it had at least its niche case. For example, in the Tal Desert with the baiting of the chargers, like it has its niche cases. Or for example, when Brewmaster needs the AOE taunt. For example, I tanked a few times in our raid, and on the first boss in like week 2, I had to tank because of setup shenanigans. I just took Blackhawk's statue, placed it down on the ground, and taunted everything off our healers.
Yeah.
Like it has its niche use case, and
at least it gives you something that you didn't have already.
Yeah.
The White Tiger statue offers nothing that you don't have already.
Yeah. The main thing that I'm annoyed about the class tree right now is the lack of passive DR that we are lacking. We are also not getting from the hero talents if we
I don't really agree on that one, to be honest.
Because I think right now I see Windwalker as a mage with stronger barriers, but those barriers have a 90-second cooldown, which is not a nice place to be in my case.
Yeah, but you have a lot of smaller things like Bounce Back, for example, was changed to only require a 12% max HP hit to trigger, which makes this a lot more likely to be up for on ICD, basically, which brings a lot of value. You have a flow of chi below 90% and above 35%. You have a 5% damage taken reduced. Since Dampen Harm got removed, and basically Fortified Brew is now on the spot of Dampen Harm, we have the opportunity to take Dance of the Wind, which will be a lot stronger now in Mythic Plus, since we don't have to sacrifice Dampen Harm for it. And especially in combination with, for example, one of the talents in the Shadow Palm tree, where you get 10% damage reduction on dodges. This will be really great in M+, in my opinion. Of course,
I
it
don't know about that.
requires some situations to happen, like if you can't dodge, you don't get the DR, but it
Yeah.
will,
My-
in the
my-
end, especially in M+, will provide a lot of survivability through
Hmm.
that.
My concern about this, I mean, I agree that Monk will be probably stronger, but the fact we lost poor close the two buffs on the left and right, so the healing part and the avoidance part makes us again a secondary choice for raid.
Yeah,
Like
I don't like how we lost our raid utility almost entirely.
like we have nothing to bring for raid except
Yeah.
the 5% physical buff, but like the healing, the 8% healing was actually a very good point for healers because it was triggering on shields and everything, trinkets, whatever you want, and the avoidance was always something nice to have. And now it's gone. And okay, we got some avoidance, we got some more defensiveness, but actually in raid, correct me if I'm wrong, but we never like struggled with any kind of lack of defensive for us because we have so
Well,
many cooldowns.
for raid, it didn't really change much at all. For us personal, the thing we lost the most was the raid utility through both of the auras.
Yeah.
This is the part I definitely agree on. Like especially on stacked fights, like when you look back at Rashok, during the intermission, you had uptime on both auras on all players basically all the time during the high damage intake phases, which allowed the healers to heal a lot more through the 4% heal increase on everyone,
8%.
And the DR. And the DR.
and the 4% DR on top as well. So it was a lot, to be honest. But I do think it's a price I'm willing to pay, just because you get so many personal stuff in the end. Like for example, the entire like Windwalker is the spec that has to be mobile because it's legit our spec fantasy, and they put so many stuff in it.
That's true.
It's
I do like that.
so fucking great. Like
Yeah.
for example, during the entire podcast, I'm sitting here in Alpha, basically doing nothing than just rolling around and dashing, and they put so many nice stuff
Laka.
and increase to the range of roll and cheat torpedo that I tested out earlier, for example, which is bugged right now and a bit underwhelming, but it's an option. And I'm putting in a Sylphen spell into the monk, which fits entirely the class fantasy. Like we're about in a piece and such shit. So being able to remove enrage effects from enemies is a great addition. And so especially for dungeon content, we get so many nice stuff and only lost the auras basically, which were more a raid focus, but in raid they aren't really required if they tune the healing correctly.
No, it doesn't. It's not really required, but it was a very good reason to bring a monk because having 8% healing, at least on the melee camp, is just quite good. And having nothing to offer the raid group might be an issue because then
Yeah,
we're back to relying on being, worth bringing on damage alone, and that's not really a state that I'm particularly confident with.
yeah, but don't forget that we didn't offer anything the other monk specs couldn't do, and you are
True,
still providing the 5% physical damage amp,
which
which
no one cares about.
no, I wouldn't say it like that. Like it's as good as Wind Fury, for example. Like you're also bringing an enhancer enhancement shaman just because they have Wind Fury in most cases when the tuning isn't so badly done. But it still will be the same for Monk. So you will still bring the Monk. The only difference is how much he will provide for the raid. And I think with the additional mobility, it's likely to say that Windwalker is in an even better spot for playing mechanics, which is also required in raiding situations. So
Yeah, but we don't have the defensives to play the mechanics.
We have, of course.
Well,
Yeah, no,
I think we have the defenses to play mechanics, but I do think we lost a lot of passive DR, especially if our stat scaling has improved to the point where we're gonna run a lot less verse. Like even now in my raid set in season 3, I only have 23% verse or 27 or something. I don't know, which that's not a lot. Like that's not a huge amount at least. If that gets any less, then I'm probably going to feel a lot squishier with one defensive removed, and just not having as much passive DR.
We
Especially
didn't lose any passive DR.
Uh,
Except the versatility, of course.
Well, the versatility, but like, we lose a significant amount of healing taken because that's gone down from 16% to 8.
Well, that I wouldn't say so. Like, flow of chi is a fucking nightmare to think about in the first place, but it's a really strong talent. Like in raiding situations, the most damage taken you take when you're either at max HP or around like 60 or 70%.
Mm-hmm.
And for those 60 and 70%, it will provide the 5% damage taken reduce. And when you drop low, you get the 10% healing received buff from it. So that kind of counters the loss of the 8% or whatever it was healing taken increase from the aura for ourselves pretty much easily. And don't forget that bounce back will be on the table now.
Yeah.
Especially since it's a 1-pointer now. It was buffed from requiring 40% to now a 12% hit. Like in raiding situations, if it doesn't bug out, which is a possible thing that happens, of course, because it happens already right now, it should trigger basically on internal cooldown, and that will be really strong, especially against stuff that ticks for like 2 or 3 times. Like for example, in smaller run fights, when you take the tank hit and the tank explodes after that, the tank explosion will be inside this 20% damage reduction all the time. And
no, it won't, because it doesn't trigger it. The only way to trigger bounce back is from the fire on the ground on Smolder Run.
Yeah, but just as an example taken now. Like a lot of raiding mechanics work like there are multiple hits after each other. And the bigger problem of bounce back, aside from it's bugging out all the time, thing was that the hits required you to take was too high in most situations to actually be able to trigger from it.
Yeah, with 12%, it should be up basically every time it can. At least when damage is going out. So yeah, I do think bounce back is a lot better, and I think the thing in raid, I don't feel very squishy. I don't imagine that's going to change much. If there is a problem, or then it's gonna be in like the high tyrannical keys, which I'm I have a vested interest in, because then losing one of your 4 defenses might actually hurt, and I'm not sure if that is properly compensated.
Well, the weird part about that is I'm not even sure if that actually hurts in the end. Like Dampen Harm is already a 2-minute cooldown, so it doesn't really cycle that easily like the 1.5-minute ones. With Fortifying Brew at 2 minutes baseline and a possible reduction to 1.5 minutes, you are now able to rotate one defensive every 30 seconds. And most dungeon mechanics cycle, at least the harmful ones, cycle for like 30 or 40 seconds each time. So it's a lot easier now to rotate your defensives, and a lot more.
So the
Yeah.
fact,
Yeah,
like,
maybe you're right. I just need to
And-
kind of try it out.
I was looking as
And
well.
don't forget that both trees, hero talent trees, actually provide some type of defensive as well. Especially when you look at the conduit tree, where you have like, Fortifying Brew now grants an absorption of 25% of your max HP
Mhm.
if you pick it.
Yes.
Or the part of which was it? Give me a second.
It's New Zero Protection.
Yeah, it's on the same choice note, I think, with the that the cast of the conduit heals you for like 10% and reduces damage intake for
Gate
15%
Sanctuary.
for like the entire cast plus 8 seconds after that.
Yeah.
So you have a like 12-second
Yeah.
long 15% damage reduction.
I'm just not sure if we should count the hero talents in this consideration because we don't know which one we're playing yet.
Yeah, we just say it
Well,
exists.
you have to.
It exists. Like, I think
It,
it's a
it
point.
does exist, yeah. That's
For
true.
example, you have also
You
the
have to
15
consider. You have to consider it somewhat, because in the end, the hero talents are meant to be a part of how your spec works. So
Mhm.
you have to consider the potential the hero talents provide on top of the normal class and spec tree. When you look at the class itself, like you won't go into M plus content and don't have a hero talent at all. Like you will have the hero talent and talents, and it comes down to the overall package. Like, yeah, you have to consider them
they need
somewhat,
to
of course not.
balance the 3 trees actually to make like because if you have even like dampen arm or more DR, and when you look at the hero tree, you have like this 15% avoidance, which is I mean, it's like when your health drops below 50%, increasing your avoidance by 15% for 6 seconds. I mean, that's again a very strong one.
Well, that probably has like thank God it didn't say after taking more than 50% health and damage, because
Yeah.
this one is actually something that could trigger reliably, but still it means that you also already need to take a very significant amount of damage before it even activates. It is entirely possible that most of that value will just go to waste. Like, how many times are you going to be lowered to 50% from full health, right? Because we're assuming that you have a capable healer and you're usually topped off. So you're topped off and you're taking so much damage as you go down to half health, and then your defensive value kicks in. Is that still relevant then? That was the biggest issue about bounce back, and is that not the same thing here? Or
Well,
is
the
to a
thing
large
is,
degree?
you have to consider how you can actually make them work. Like, for example, this you need to drop below 50%, and then for the next 6 seconds you get the 15% avoidance.
Yeah.
Can you manage to pause drop yourself below the 50% 5 seconds before a big AoE damage occurs? And are you able to wait it out with healing you up enough to make the avoidance count? Like, of course,
sounds
those are
terrible
niche
way around.
situations and require a lot of thought in the end, because they need some time to set up and obviously need to be played properly to get any value out of it. But they do provide some value.
Well,
The
it's
issue with
also
bounce back was more.
avoidance, right? Like, I'm thinking of, let's say you have Dandelion Axe in Black Cold. He does a massive hit that also applies a dot, so that would be the perfect situation to have something like Bounce Back or Whirling Steel. But it gives you avoidance. Does that even work on the dots? I mean, probably
No.
doesn't. So
It doesn't work on dots.
So what kind of thing?
Well, I think especially when you look at Blacker Cold, I would never pick this part of the choice note. I would always go for predictive training. Like, especially the few really dangerous parts, I would say, in Black Occult can be the charge of the third boss, including the big AoE it does, or the shooting guys right before the second boss.
Yeah, I guess.
Or for example, the roller coaster guys after the second boss, and
Yeah.
the combination of predictive training and a dance off the wind will be really strong
Gonna
for
be really good.
especially
But that's only
such.
true. Like Black Orc is one of the very few dungeons that even has stuff that you can dodge as a DPS. How much is that actually going to happen in the dungeons in the War
Like,
Within?
We'll have to see.
that's obviously a bit up to the exact dungeon design.
Yeah,
But for
but
example,
giving
Siege of Borealis has a lot of randomly shooting guys.
are those
Wait,
actually physical damage because they're all
yeah,
like firing Azerite shots and stuff, right? They could just well be fire damage.
there's if I remember
Actually, I
correctly,
have
they
idea.
were entirely physical, or at least counted as physical projectile, which you could dodge. But a lot of such things like charges, random shots, are in most cases dodgeable.
Where's the first
To me,
powder shot, right?
the Swelling Steel
Uh,
talent is about forgiving mistakes. I don't know, like for example, if you take about Firac, because it pulses a lot, I don't know, like you take, for example, the shit on the ground, probably your health drops below 50%, and the tick from the fight, itself, helps healer. I don't think it's something you really have to play around. And for predictive training, again, yeah, as I said, it really depends on boss design and dungeon design.
I think in most cases you will just pick up predictive training. For the few cases it works because Whirling Steel won't really provide any meaningful gain when you don't actually play around it. And I don't think most people will play around it. It's much easier to just pick up Soothing Mist and Elusive Mists and just try to snipe the big damage events with this one, instead of doing such a weird setup with forcing yourself below 50% to proc it. But it has to be
You would
off
never play
CD.
around that.
Yeah, it's unlikely to play around it. And therefore I would always go for predictive training like all the time, kind of.
Yeah.
Except maybe raid bosses where you are 100% sure you can't dodge anything. I would
Which is
just
a
pick it
lot.
up for
Like that's most raid fights.
yeah. To be fair, it's most raid fights.
Do we have
Even most
information about
dungeons.
the raid, by the way? Do we have like adventure journal or something like this?
I don't think so.
Give me a second.
I think there may be a journal, but like no
Nah,
information.
it's way too early for that.
No
Maybe
journal.
like on the alpha they put, I don't know,
wait.
maybe.
Oh no, never mind. Journal is there.
But there's nothing in it, right?
There's boss mechanics for
Oh, okay.
all bosses.
Okay, surprising.
And the end boss has a fuck ton of small ads, as it looks like 2, 4, 6 different enemy types in stage 2.
That sounds like Boomy time.
Yeah, it depends how they work
Well,
out.
Boomy's getting a pretty big rework as well, right?
Yeah, there are now at 2 minutes back, I think, but
Good for
Oi, PI is ours. Go away.
well, yeah.
So maybe we can talk now.
Sadly, Warcraft Logs is down. Also, I would have looked at like Siege, what you can dodge or not.
Maybe we can go a bit into the back to the spec tree, and maybe pick up some talents worth to talk about. Let's try to make it like in 35-minute ish, because it's gonna be 4 and then I have shit to do. And if we didn't finish yet, we can just do a second part, and I think we will do a second part anyway because we just barely mentioned a lot of things.
Well, let's focus on momentum then, because I think that is the single biggest
Yes.
change to the entire tree.
Let me
Momentum
go to
boost.
this
Momentum
one.
boost is the huge reason why we suspect that stat scaling might be in a better spot in the War Within. It buffs your Fist of Fury damage by your haste value is the simplest way to put it, and the increase on the channel time, or like increase on every time it deals damage, that just makes it kind of go crazy in AoE. Like I know, you notice it doesn't say every tick or anything. It says every time it deals damage. It does have a cap of 10, and it doesn't like it's not just a cap of 10 per hit, but actually a total cap of 10. But it means that if you're hitting 10 targets with it, it just immediately jumps up to 100% increased damage for the rest of the channel, and then on top of the haste scaling. That thing pumps. And then
That's a very, very big underestimation, but yes.
yeah, exactly. And then you increase the auto attack speed after that is just kind of something that it's a minor quality of life that we've been asking for since forever. Give us something to compensate for the loss of auto attacks. Combine that with the auto attacks through spinning crane kick, and we're essentially never stopping auto attacks anymore, which is great. Even slightly more auto attacks than before. So that's a fantastic change. But yeah, momentum boost is a insanely stacked talent. I think it will get nerfed to actually being 10% more damage per tick, not per damage event, so that it actually just slowly goes up as the channel progresses. I think that's the healthiest way to do it, because it's supposed to be an incentive to never cancel your channel, right? It's supposed to give you a reason to always finish your channel, which it definitely does. I don't think we needed that without Serenity, but that's fine. I'll take it.
Well, if I remember correctly, we also cancelled out Fist of Fury during Weapons of Order back then. So it's
that's
still a good thing to have in the spell,
this
especially since it prevents possible cancels in the future at all.
Yeah, this will also be a huge barrier for newer players, because newer players have a big tendency to accidentally cancel their last tick of Fist of Fury, and the last tick of Fist of Fury is a really big hit now, so that will be a huge mistake to make for newer players. But I think that's maybe a good thing. Like that's a sort of skill ceiling that you actually have to learn, have to think about.
Maybe they could just like in the UI make the tick,
You can just make a macro, but like, yeah, I think making it visualized on your bar is the correct way to deal with it. I think having a macro make you unable to cast through Fist of Fury is the lazy, cheesy way out.
Yeah. My concern about this talent, I don't know. It's like it's 1 point, but it's it's clearly way too strong for this 1 point budget. So yeah, might expect a lot of.
It's also unavoidable almost. Like it's so early on in the path that you can almost not take it. So I think it's kind of fine.
You can't not take it. Like to progress further down after Flying Serpent Kick, for example, you need to spend 8 points.
Exactly.
When you just go the right in the middle, you only have 7 points. So you can't avoid to pick it.
Yeah. So it's essentially just the baseline effects. So
Yeah.
maybe not worry too much about its value as a talent point, I guess. Well, try to avoid it. Like, try to build a set without it.
Yeah, it's legit just impossible to do. Like, the same counts, by the way, for Glory of the Dawn on the right side as well. So
you can go around
both talents that what? No, you can't.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. Glory, that's an acclamation.
Sorry, acclamation. Never mind.
Yeah, like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you can actually avoid Glory. Never mind.
If we stay on this time, maybe we can talk also the fact that Expelam now is a passive one. It's no longer a button to press.
So
it feels really weird.
It feels really weird. I don't know how it feels. I haven't tried it myself. I'll take your word for it. I think I liked having the additional chi from it. As I said, I would like to have a little bit more chi on burst. I don't know yet if that is fine without it, because obviously we have the chi from Storm with Fire if you play Ardent Elements, which I think you always will. I don't know.
It's the idea to have less button to press, but also it doesn't generate keys, so it's just a really passive.
It sort of feels meaningless if it's not on its own button. Like,
it's just basically a tiger palm buff in the end now. Like the biggest issue I have with this is Expelhelm was the perfect quality of life button, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Like you had a perfect low shot CD mastery combination button that you could have pressed in the meantime. It was perfect to just gather some chi while you run from pack to pack in M+. It was perfect to build your one chi you can bring into a raid boss fight. If you're low, you can press it, and especially with Strength of the Spirits, much further down the class tree, it actually healed you for a pretty good amount, and it's now, it's the passive one is just bad, to be honest.
It looks like a
it's
mix
just
Like,
with
it's
Eye of the
boring.
Tiger
It
and
adds very little. Yeah, it's just the heal on your Tiger. Like the 100% additional damage on Tiger Bomb essentially means nothing. Tiger Bomb does so little damage that it doesn't matter. So it's just the heal. You know, the
Yeah.
damage from Expel Harm also doesn't matter because that's even less. Uh, every
It- it-
15 seconds on Tiger Bomb, you heal yourself a bit. That's it.
Yeah,
It,
this
it
is
feels a bit like Eye of the Tiger has felt in the past. Like
Sort of, yeah.
it's okay to be there. It's a small damage amp in the end. Like it does provide some throughput in the end. It provides also some heal in the end, but it's so meaningless that they can delete it and you wouldn't even notice it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
but you
and
have to
before
take it.
Expelharm
That's the
was the
issue.
utility.
Yeah, you kind of have to take it, but I would rather have any other. Like they could have put Eye of the Tiger there, and it would.
They could have put Expelharm, the unused one, there without an issue. Like
No, but
I don't.
then you would be forced to take it, and that was the whole point, and to remove it from the button load.
Yeah, but I don't think removing Expelharm from the button load is a good thing in the end.
Mm.
Like, they could have also removed like Cracking Dread Lightning. Of course, it's the only on-range pull thingy you have, but I would rather bind Expelharm than Crackling Dread Lightning. And in almost all cases, like, I don't really understand the point of making this one a passive. Because it was for more purposes used than just, okay, yeah, you need the cheat. Like, it's such a big and nice button for all different
Right,
purposes.
I have a
and
solution. What if they changed Expel Harm so that its overheal would turn into an Absorb Shield?
would be pretty yeah,
Wouldn't really matter because it doesn't do any healing.
it doesn't do any healing when you're not low. That's the whole point. Like, the only reason why Expelharm healed you for something was Strength of the Spirit, and that requires you to be low.
Like,
So
even if regular Expel Harm is still a 41k on me, that's 5% of my health. If I get a 5% Absorb Shield just from pressing Tiger Palm every once in a while, that's something.
yeah, sure, but it wouldn't really change the fact that missing out on Expelharm as a single button is bad.
Well, that's my main issue, right? Like, I no longer have my fine-tuned control over my chi generation.
Like, I wouldn't even mind if they just removed Vivify from us and instead just put Expelharm in the slot entirely.
Yeah.
Like, Expelharm is such a great button, even though it has like 15 seconds cooldown.
Is there any spec with any spec at all really that only gets their resources from a single source?
Hunters. So yeah.
Do they? I mean, you could say that, I guess, but Focus recharges on its own anyway.
Yeah, Focus is like energy, and they only get their Bob. Oh, never mind. It depends how you count Bob shot.
Yeah, I guess. But like I don't know. It feels weird to me. I don't. It's been so long since Tiger Palm was the only chi gen that I don't know how to feel about it. Because like you don't just lose expel harm, but you also lose chi burst and power strikes. So I don't know.
Well, yeah, Power Strikes is okay because you get the free chi from the blackout kick with the other talent down the tree.
If you take that.
Yeah, but I think in most cases you will take that.
I'm convinced.
But yeah, I can't guarantee that, of course. But I think it's fine to not have Power Strikes. I think it's also fine that Chi Burst doesn't really get any Chi anymore. I just don't think the slight increase on Chi from Expel Harm actually mattered that much that it had to be removed.
Yeah,
Like,
I think. Well, I mean, that's probably not why they did it. I imagine. I think they felt that it was
Yeah.
useless enough, or like not too valuable that they couldn't just remove the button press itself.
Yeah, but that shows clearly that they don't really play Windwalker because everyone who plays Windwalker for a bit notices after a while that Expel Harm is
Very
a
strong.
really great button, especially in dungeon content.
Yeah, that's
Like
true.
in raid, you could argue, yeah, okay, you can
Yeah,
get rid of
or
it
something.
because it's only useful for like a downtime in boss fights or the one chi at the start, which is okay that they get rid of basically with this.
Yeah.
But especially in content like dungeons or even open world. Like in open world, the healing from Expel Harm with Strength of the Spirit is really good when you're in danger.
Yeah, but actually having to go and hit something for it kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, like you
Yeah.
could have now killed your enemy, just quickly healed up with Expel Harm and jumped into the next enemy. Now you can't heal up between without Vivify.
Yeah, and I mean,
And Vivify is still
kind
a
of,
shit button.
yeah, kind of Vivify really needs a buff. Like, I don't know, maybe make it cost more energy or something, but it's just so weak for what it does.
Yeah. Also, the fact that it was a 0.5 GCD was nice when you quickly need one key, for example, to press spinning crank kick or whatever.
Yeah, it just felt nice, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're on 2 chi and you want to cast Fist of Fury, just doing that really quick spell harm to get into your Fist of Fury, especially because it's short CD, felt really satisfying. And now having to do a full GCD on a Tiger Palm that you might not even have energy for at the time, that's gonna feel a lot worse.
And you're maybe breaking mastery with the Tiger Palm because you
Especially
like
then, yeah.
You have Fist of Fury available. You have 0 chi. You do Tiger Palm Expel Harm right now. Now you're at 0 chi. You need to Tiger Palm. Need to do a filler between like Blackout Kick and another Tiger Palm, which costs a lot more energy and in the end now globals than before. And
I really hope that we at least keep our Flying Serpent Kick combo strike.
oh yeah, I didn't. Don't think
Like,
I tested
there
that yet.
there is a slight risk right now because Flying Serpent Kick has lost its damage component, which means
No, it's proccing a hit combo
yeah,
right now.
it's it probably still
Okay.
does, but
Okay.
but like I could technically see it being removed from combo strikes because it's weird for a non-damaging ability to be a combo strike. That's never happened before.
Well, no, not really. It happened before.
Bone Dust Brew, I guess.
Yeah.
What does it
And to be
work?
honest, the part that triggers the mastery isn't the damage in the end. The first part.
But it could still be explained by it also having a damage component.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That for sure.
The only spell that truly never should have been a combo strike was Weapons of Order, and even then we know why it became a combo strike.
Yeah.
Maybe after this talk, we can just go back to this momentum because I think I missed the image. Yeah, thank you for like I don't see the Discord on my. I have just one laptop here. So true about Expelon, we all agree about this. Maybe we can just we have a graph. I think it's very interesting for people to have more visualization
kind
of how
circles back to what I was saying about the weird scaling of Fist of Fury and AoE.
So maybe can you explain this
momentum
graph
boost.
to us? What does it
Yes.
show, and what's the abscess, things like
So
this?
the blue line is essentially how Fist of Fury works right now. It's the square root 5 targets off target, which means that the single target damage is essentially unchanged, but the secondary targets only scales up to 5, and then it starts square root scaling, which is sort of diminishing returns per target. And let's not get into what exactly that means, because that's just math. It means that every target past 5 adds less damage to the overall cast than just an uncapped ability would. As an example, you have the yellow line, which is how an uncapped spell would work if it just added another full 100% of the ability per target. Something like, actually, I don't know what a good
Whirling Dragon Punch, for
Right,
example,
Whirling Dragon
was
Punch.
until
Yeah.
Wolfen.
Whirling Dragon Punch used to be just, on 5 targets, you do 500% of your damage. On 7 targets, you do 700% of your damage. On 20 targets, you do 2000% of your damage. You can see that square root 5 targets does have a pretty significant diminishing returns, to the point where it does like half of its intended or its total damage on 20 targets. It still does more damage on 20 targets than it does on 5, but the increase is significantly reduced. Now we look at the momentum Fist of Fury, which is the red line. And holy shit, like, this ability scales so fast because of how it works right now. Because, like I said, it can scale up to 10 times, right? That 10% can go all the way up to 100. But because it's per damage event, it scales up faster if you hit multiple targets with it. So if you're hitting 5 targets with it, it goes up to about 850, I think, like almost immediately. And then it just keeps, and then it just stays at that value for the rest of the channel. It's that interaction makes it scale with targets so fast that it's significantly better than uncapped AoE ability up until about 17 targets, which is probably not intended. That means that on a big AoE pool, you're going to outscale the Fire Mage by a mile.
In case you have both the same base, of course.
You might
Like,
lose to an
that's
affliction lock.
that's the thing you still have to consider. This is a normalized graph, so it's always about 100% strength at one target, and then scales with the target scaling up.
Yeah,
So
this is a multiplier
just because
on Fist of Fury damage.
just because it's scaling better than an uncapped ability of the same strength doesn't mean exactly that it's better in the end. It just means that it will scale better than the same spell if it would be just uncapped without the rest of the scaling.
Like, let's say you have, like, I don't really know how Fire Mage works, so this example will not be accurate. But let's say Flame Strike does the same amount of damage as Fist of Fury on one target. If you just pop a Flame Strike on one target, it does the same amount as a full channel Fist of Fury. If you were to then cast Flame Strike on 10 targets, it just does 10 times the amounts that damage. 10 times the damage of a Fist of Fury. But with momentum, a Fist of Fury cast on 10 targets would deal about like 20% more damage than that Flame Strike. That's how quickly it scales.
And it's exactly, it's pretty funny because a lot of people had issues with Windwalker in the past because of the target scaling.
Yeah.
Like the issue was that other specs that are uncapped scale a lot better with bigger pulls than we do, just because we have the square root 5 scaling on most of our abilities, or the square root 5 on off targets, like in the case of Fist of Fury. But this isn't an argument anymore, especially for Fist of Fury. It still is an argument for Whirling Dragon Punch, which became now a square root 5 that also deals some more damage to the main target. But that's another thing. And Spinning Crane Kick is also still a square root 5, same as Rushing Jadewind, And Strike of the Windlord still has this very weird scaling. But a Fist of Fury, which will be a lot of our damage in War Within, will be pretty strong and even stronger than some uncapped scalings, especially in the lower target amount.
It's
Like up
pretty
to
safe
10
to say that if this stays the way it is, we are going to be absolute monsters in big pulls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just there is no doubt.
Well, we need to keep
Or
in
we
mind
are
this is
bad in all.
relative damage increase. We need also to look at the baseline damage of the ability, because obviously if
Right,
Feast
but the
of
base
Fury hits like a wet noodle, it's just
but
Yeah,
it
but
does
it won't because it has to
because we
work in
also
single
have
target.
haste scaling, right? Is it like not only do you have Fist of Fury is already a pretty stacked ability without any modifiers. We're losing a couple of modifiers to it in the rework, but we're also like we still have transfer the power. We still have the haste scaling from momentum itself. Is there anything I'm forgetting about that's obvious?
Some of the hero talents also have damage
Oh yeah, we have
increases on
some
it.
Fist of Fury buffs on
Yeah.
Temple Training.
And the
for
fact
example.
that Fist of Fury needs to deal enough damage to be worth casting in single target. They can't just nerf it to the ground.
Yeah, exactly. They have a sort of minimum that they need to maintain before it just falls out of the rotation completely.
So I got a question from Kido, maybe if you wanna, because maybe I think it's not clear. Is the Fist of Fury is gonna be like DH doing big damage in a given window, like
Yes, except it's your highest priority ability for your entire rotation. It's not like I-beam where you do it once and then have to wait the whole time to get it back. You just have to wait 15 seconds, if not less, because of your CDR. Like you still have your cooldown reduction from Rising Sun Kick if you play Zuen's Battle Gear, for example. Blackout Kick still reduces its cooldown every time you cast it, and even more if you play Ordered Elements. Which means your Fist of Fury is going to be a large part of your rotation. You're going to cast it very often.
Yeah, I think this is a conclusion we
So,
can
yeah.
make when we look at this graph. It's just in AoE, Fist of Fury is going to be much stronger than that now. Like this is clearly what we can see comparing the blue line and the red line. But it also is going to be, because of that and the haste scaling, probably one of the biggest, because it's hard to say without numbers yet and tuning and shit, but one of our biggest AoE contribution, regardless, I would say, the given window, so given like the Skyreach or whatever you want, any window, it's just like it's going to be a good contribution. It's going to be something you press and cool down on AoE, and probably in single target. I don't know yet, but at least in AoE, I think this is where Blizzard wants us to go, to press big ability on cooldown and not canceling it for whatever fucking reason, because it makes sense.
That seems to be the design, yeah.
I think this is how we can look at the monk right now. Is just press game management, energy management, press those key spenders on cooldown with yeah, it's just that, I think.
Yeah, it's hard to say how exactly that ends up in the rotation because like we do kind of still like in terms of design we would like to cast spinning crane kick still, right? Like if you don't cast spinning crane kick in AoE, then you only cast it when you have like dance procs, and that's boring. The issue is that if Fist of Fury is so stacked, then Rising Sun Kick gains a lot of value because you have Suen's Battle Gear, which reduces the cooldown, and you have Rising Sun Kick for Ordered Elements to reduce the Chi cost, and Blackout Kick gains a lot of value because like every stack of Shadowboxing Treads and Ancient or Teachings of the Monastery reduces your Fist of Fury cooldown. So every time you cast Blackout Kick, you cast more Fist of Fury. In terms of calculation, it means that every Blackout Kick gains a portion of Fist of Fury's value in the rotation, which then pushes Spinning Crane Kick lower a little bit. If they're not careful, it could mean that Fist of Fury, Rising Sun Kick, and Blackout Kick all overtake Spinning Crane Kick in the AoE priority, which means you don't cast Spinning Crane Kick at all. And that would be bad. Then you're sort of in the Dragonflight Season 2 rotation, which is just single targets, except for a couple of dance procs sometimes.
It's how to say,
which we don't like.
yeah. That's why we need to look at how in practice because obviously you guys don't have the alpha. Uh, we need to look at in practice how does it feel and how does everything combines. Uh, maybe like because I would like to finish around 4 p.m. I would like maybe to know if you guys have looked at any stream or, for example, J Funk or whatever from the alpha, or if you completely,
Well,
I don't know.
Hurst has played it.
Oh yeah, but I only tested some interactions and played a few minutes on the dummies without pressing Fist of Fury for a specific reason. But that was yeah. Overall, I think it's a good step because we are back to more like the 40 to 45 casts per minute, which we had in the past. Like in Dragonflight, for example, we now are reaching like 53, 54 CPM, which doesn't feel right for a spec that should be about thinking things through and planning things ahead. And it's a lot slower now, but I don't really think it's bad. The bad type of slow. It feels good. I'm just not sure about specific things like the factor of damage windows we suddenly have that we would want to line up with each other, and that's a pretty annoying thing. And I'm also not really sure if the incentive to use the Fists of Fury really feels good when it results in ignoring a spinning crane kick, which can easily happen, and that doesn't feel good as well. Like Sayoko already said it earlier, like in season 2, it was okayish for one season, but designing the entire spec to be like that for an entire expansion would just be bad.
Yeah, that would be boring.
It would feel really bad. But aside from that, I really like how it feels right now. The mobility feels nice. I think the interactions are pretty nice, and I also think that the hero talents don't really provide a lot of changes to the playstyle. Is a good thing in the end.
Yeah.
Even for
Now that we
some
got
people,
reworked, it's actually a good thing. Yeah.
yeah, it's like I want the play style of the reworked Windwalker without having to min-max a factor of small little things that come from a hero talent tree, and I think both hero talent trees do it pretty well. Like they add some type of interaction that can end up in playstyle changes, but don't really force a lot of changes,
Yeah,
like
they don't
the
really dominate the
Covenant
rotation.
spells did.
Yeah.
So it's overall pretty nice, I have to say. And I'm a Serenity hater, so I don't really mind that it's gone. So.
Like when I look at this talent tree and all the discussion, it's clear they put some emphasis on Feast of Fury, and I hope, as you said, there is no like a mismatch and imbalance between Feast of Fury and Spinning Crane Kick, and I hope like the tier set design won't be that way because
Yeah. So
that's a risk,
just
you
as
know.
an example, I would like to give you the idea that I have of the best AoE priority. That would be like Dance to Chi-Chi, Fist of Fury, Spinning Crane Kick, Rising Sun Kick, Blackout Kick. In my opinion, that would be the most ideal AoE priority.
I think
Or the most
for example,
healthy game.
the ideal healthy way to include Blackout Kick in AoE situations would be to mostly use it when you reach the maximum of Teaching of the Monastery stacks, or when you have a free proc. It's I think that's the perfect middle ground between not using Blackout Kick and using Blackout Kick like we do in the current season.
Mm-hmm.
this would
Agree.
like result in using it like every 10 seconds in average, I think.
Every
Which
spell
would
we
be
have needs to have
fine.
its place. It needs to have
Yeah.
its value in the kits. If it doesn't have value, it won't be pressed, and that's not good. That's bad design.
And when you said this priority, it's like you have the proc, you have the big CD in AoE, you have the AoE, I would say classic spender, and then you have Rising
Yeah.
Sun Kick, and then only you have Blackout Kick, which is it's to dump the extra key you
Yeah,
have,
that
and you don't have nothing to
extra
press.
key or like when like Percy said, like you have a lot of stacks on your blackout kick that you need to press at some point.
Yes.
And of
Or
course,
the free one to
Yeah.
maintain mastery, for example.
you should probably not
Between
underestimate
two
how many
spinning
free
crankings.
caps they're gonna get, because between natural procs from Tiger Palm and the guaranteed proc from that one talent, you're probably going to get a pretty significant amount of free blackout kick cast. So you should not feel forced to spend chi on blackout kick all that much, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, especially when you think about that we will scale with haste, so it's not unlikely that we are running around with like 20-25% haste, bumping up our energy generation as well.
Yeah.
Which also results in more Tiger Palm and more free breakout kicks as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I think is very achievable with the current talent tree. They just need to tune it properly.
Yeah.
Maybe like lower Fist of Fury, increase maybe spinning crank kick, and make, I don't know.
I think they're already trying to do exactly this. Like the rework patch notes already include a 20% damage buff to spinning crane kick, and a pretty significant increase to the crane vortex value. It went from like 10 and 20 per node to 15 to 30. So that's pretty significant.
Yeah.
That means that Crane Vortex is probably quite a stacked talent. It's hard to say if it compares well enough to the other talents that you would be giving up for it, but it's definitely a start, and it shows that they are aware of the potential problems that they're creating. So, good sign.
Great. That's a nice way to conclude this first part of the big podcast. I hope we can do the second part very quickly, because I think we need now to go a bit more into details. Like, it's just to tease maybe the next discussion about obviously hero talent, because I think we pretty just go quickly on it, like with the defensive wise capability of those stones, the scrap stones, but also, well, I think, yeah, momentum was, and I think is the biggest this center of discussion right now of the Spectre. Obviously, there is also this weapon of order we already discussed a bit. We talk about the low duration could be increased. But yeah, I think we will go a bit more into details and try maybe to construct, to build some possible trees talents. But it seems, when I look at the design, the points, and what we have in stock, in budget of points to spend, it's going to be pretty hard, I think. It doesn't seem that clear as in Dragonflight with 3 paths. So maybe we need to look at it a bit deeper on the next session.
Yeah, I agree. Looking forward to it.
Yep. Oh, it's
Definitely.
4 p.m. I think we can conclude right now. For this first part, I think it was very clear to get into this general details. I think it was necessary before going too much into details, but to get the general value, some explanations, and also that, like, what personally, what I just my conclusion of this is, we have been heard.
Indeed.
That's pretty like the,
100%.
the summary. It's just that we have
Yeah.
been heard. Maybe
Our
do you want to say something to
prayers
conclude,
have
guys?
been
I don't know.
answered.
Like,
Yeah, you're really hitting the nail on the head with that. We felt like the middle child for a very long time, like at least the entirety of Dragonflight, and a little bit before that even. The strength of Windwalker during Shadowlands felt more like a fluke than, the result of of a buff or a powerful addition or something. And like the power in Legion, which was like arguably the golden age of Windwalker, was absolutely a fluke, and there's no doubt about that. And for the first time in I don't know how many years, our concerns have been noted and have been directly addressed, and that is a massive relief. It means that finally we don't feel like our complaints and our feedback just falls on deaf ears. So yeah, I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, and especially like I wasn't as hyped for Shadowlands or Dragonflight as I was and I am now for Wall Within, just
Yeah.
because like we got literally dead talents that provided 0 damage in our Spectre in the last section for Dragonflight. And
Not just
they
not damage,
didn't
but not even any utility.
yeah, they didn't even touch that for like the whole 2 years of Dragonflight. We had a fuck ton of issues that we brought to Dragonflight that came from Shadowlands. They were entirely ignored. Like for example, we had a bug that Empowered Tiger Lightning could miss, and they ignored that until like I think end of season 2 when they fixed it. And it felt really bad that I never listened to feedback, never listened to bug reports, and now we get a fuck ton of changes that are directly coming from the one forum post we have in the Peak Discord. That includes a lot of possible ways to change up things, and it just feels so good. Not gonna lie, this is such a great feeling. I was close to quitting World of Warcraft, to be honest, and I'm so far away now after they actually touched Windwalker.
You're right back in.
That reminds me of another person that was very close to quitting.
Indeed, yeah. I remember a post about being some like Dragonfight will almost certainly be the last expansion that I write the guides for. I think is what he said.
Yep.
Guess who changed his mind?
And it's like a lot of Windwalker vets and long-time Windwalkers stopped playing Windwalker through the last 4 years because they didn't really address issues at all. And now a lot of them are coming back. Just because they actually change things that are bad, and that's so good.
I also hope this, like, they simplify a bit, you know, like they want to make the spec more accessible, because a pretty question I've seen on Peak
Ooh.
was,
Well, I think
is
we're
it
going to go
easy?
into that in part 2.
Yeah,
Because
but
that's
I think, yeah, that's gonna be
big
something. I hope. I said I hope. Maybe it's not going to be the case, but let's see in
Yeah.
part 2 in a few days. I hope. Thank you guys for being here.
Accessible.
Accessible, yeah. This is the word accessible. Maybe it's going to be more complex than that. We'll see. Thank you guys for being
That's
here. Oh, maybe you want to say something.
difficult.
Did you say something, Color, about, by the way?
I don't think it's going to be very accessible.
Okay.
Like I
yeah,
said,
we'll-
I think this is a whole discussion that we can
Stay tuned for part 2 for 3 hours
Yeah.
podcast
And
again.
part 3!
And
Mark, I
part
think
3.
4.
Because I think part 2 is going to be again 3 hours podcast, but I think it's nice to cut it like in several parts because people will just be too much information. I think we have already a lot of information today. So let's see in part 2, okay?
Let's
see. Nice. And I'll let you cook a bit your nice graphs and shit. And I hope the stream wasn't too laggy, because yeah, it was a bit pain in I have a 4G box. Here it's not even like a proper fiber or something, so yeah, hope it was fine.
Yeah, well.
Okay, I wish you a very good afternoon, guys. Have to go anyway. And let's set up for the part 2 soon with more information about Windwalker, and let's fucking go.
Indeed, let's go.
Let's go.
Bye, guys.
Goodbye.
And that's it for today, boys. C'est tout pour aujourd'hui, pour ce premier podcast de plus de 2 heures et demie. On a essayé de faire un peu court aujourd'hui. J'espère que ça vous aura plu. que ça n'a pas trop lagué. Donc on a parlé de plein de choses aujourd'hui, de manière très générale, les talents. So we talk about a lot of things today, talents, plus, cons, pros, cons, whatever, a lot of things. On a vraiment parlé de plein de choses aujourd'hui, c'est super cool d'avoir Earthy avec nous, Caller et Serioku sur ce propos avec des petits graphes et tout. On essaiera de faire un truc un petit peu plus en détail la prochaine fois. Donc on parlera notamment de est-ce que Monk va être facile à jouer ou pas, est-ce qu'il y aura un build, plusieurs builds. So we talk about next time about how Monk is going to be accessible or not. Quite, it seems it's going to be harder to play. And less accessible. We're going to talk about talents, capstones, different builds, and things like this. And it's going to be, and there would be probably a part 3. Alors peut-être une partie 3, où là on ira un peu plus dans le détail de l'extension, les boss, etc. Mais pour l'instant, bon, c'est vraiment que le début. Pour la saison 4, je vous rappelle qu'on a fait un podcast avec tous les éléments dont vous avez besoin pour la saison 4. Je vais le mettre sur Twitch. So for season 4, you got everything you need to know about season 4 with our previous podcast. It's on my Twitch channel and I will put on YouTube when I have time. So feel free to go and you will have all the information you need for season 4. And I wish you a very good afternoon. Très bon après-midi à tous. Bisous et à très vite. Et bonnes vacances. Pour ceux qui sont en vacances comme moi.